I hereby declare that all cultivators of this world must acknowledge allegiance to me, Jin Yunshin said, his voice cool and clear. He took a step forward, and the mountain and sea realm shook. The power of the 9 mountains and 9 seas had been crushed. All mountain and sea cultivators were trembling in body and soul under the pressure radiating down from Jin Yunshin. As of this moment, it seemed that they had no choice but to surrender. I hereby declare that from this day forth I am the lord of this realm. A strange light gleamed in Jin Yunshin's eyes as he took another step forward. Heaven and earth cracked and crumbled. The 9 mountains shook violently, and the 9 seas churned. All living beings bowed their heads. Under the gaze of Jin Yunshin, they had no choice but to capitulate. Behind Jin Yunshin, the boundless horde of cultivators from the vast expanse school were cheering excitedly. Gold robes! Gold robes! Gold robes! The sound wave created by their cries filled the starry sky of the mountain and sea realm, becoming the only sound that anyone could hear. Jin Yunshin hovered there, reveling in the unprecedented feeling of glory. In his mind, he was finally able to experience what it must have been like to be Meng Hao, to look down indifferently at everything in the starry sky. Meng Hao, the world has forgotten you, but I won't. Today, I will wipe you completely out of existence. I will take your place as the new lord of the starry sky. He flicked his sleeve, and the 9 mountains and 9 seas trembled. But then, the fluctuations of the first demon sealing hex arose from within the first mountain and sea. As the ripples closed in on Jin Yunshin, his eyes narrowed, and his hand flashed in an incantation gesture. The wave of his finger caused the void to collapse as he fought back against the first hex. It was at that point that the second hex erupted from the second mountain and sea. Then came the third hex, and the fourth. In the blink of an eye, the power of 8 hexing magics were shooting toward Jin Yunshin. It was a dazzling display that seemed capable of killing any and all living things. Time distorted, space rippled. Death was descending. Jin Yunshin threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Meng Hao, if you came out in person to fight me, I might be worried. But this paltry mountain and sea realm isn't enough to kill me. Break! Even as his laughter rang out, he shoved his right hand out. Golden light exploded from his palm, spreading out in all directions, causing the entire starry sky to turn golden. Everything above and below shone like gold. The entire world was turning golden, even the 9 mountains and 9 seas, and it seemed like something which could never be changed. As the 8 incoming hexing magics bore down on Jin Yunshin, they suddenly ground to a halt and then shattered. At the same time, Jin Yunshin waved his sleeve, unleashing his divine sense and cultivation base. The power of transcendence erupted out. He held nothing back, causing golden light to spread out in all directions. The first mountain and sea was stained completely golden, and the effects spread rapidly. Next was the second mountain and sea. After that, the third and fourth mountains and seas became gold. The will of golden-robed Jin Yunshin forced its way into the mountain and sea realm, occupying it, transforming it into his own precious treasure. The cultivators of the mountain and sea realm were in complete despair. They were suppressed, their eyes bloodshot, completely incapable of fighting back. Rumbling could be heard as the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th mountains and seas all turned golden. Jin Yunshin's laughter filled the entire realm. It was at this point that, with no warning whatsoever, a powerful blast of energy surged out. It came from that which Meng Hao had founded the entire 9th mountain and sea upon, the Seal the Heavens Hex. As the hex erupted, it became an enormous blade which, in the space of a single breath, bore down on Jin Yunshin. His face fell, and a tremor ran through him. Without the slightest hesitation, he swished his sleeve. Instantly, all of the cultivators from the vast expanse school suddenly vanished. To their shock, they reappeared in front of Jin Yunshin, a sea of people that he was attempting to use to block the blade that was the Seal the Heavens Hex. Instantly, blood-curdling screams began to ring out as the cultivators in front of Jin Yunshin were slashed by the blade. They were shredded into pieces, sending blood and gore flying out in all directions, to then rain down onto the mountain and sea realm. The blade continued to scream along toward the golden-robed Jin Yunshin. His scalp was completely numb. This was the first time since transcending that he had experienced such a sensation of critical danger. Impossible! I refuse to believe that I can't fight this magical item of yours, Meng Hao. Roaring with rage, Jin Yunshin performed an incantation gesture and then waved his finger. Rumbling sounds erupted as a huge turtle shell appeared in front of him. It was none other than the precious treasure of the vast expanse school, which was now being used to intercept the blade. BOOMM. The vast expanse school's precious treasure, the turtle shell, exploded into bits. At the same time, though, the incoming blade seemed to grow blurry. After all, the blade was not being unleashed by Meng Hao personally. It was merely the power of the magical item itself, and obviously had limitations. Jin Yunshan's eyes glowed with excitement, and even a flicker of viciousness. He fell back, waving his sleeve to summon numerous worlds, land masses, and planets, all to intercept the blade and defend himself. Heaven and earth trembled. The starry sky shook. Worlds were destroyed, planets were shattered, and land masses burst into flames. However, the blade was slowly fading until it almost wasn't visible. Finally, Jin Yunshan's cultivation base erupted with the power of transcendence. Howling, he stopped moving backward and jumped forward to meet the blade. As the two met, the blade faded away, becoming countless vanishing fragments. However, it still passed through Jin Yunshan. Even his transcendent fleshly body couldn't block it. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and one of his arms was completely severed. Next, his body trembled and then collapsed into pieces. The only thing which remained was his head, and yet he was laughing uproariously. Unexpectedly, his body formed back together and was whole once more. He seemed very weak, his face drastically pale. He had been immeasurably close to death moments ago. Had the blade not dissipated when it did, he would definitely have been destroyed in body and soul. Now, having believed himself to have defeated the precious treasure that was the mountain and sea realm, he laughed and waved his sleeve, causing golden light to spill out toward the ninth mountain and sea. Moments later, it seemed as if the ninth mountain and sea were about to be completely transformed into the color of gold. The mountain and sea realm cultivators were in a state of complete hopelessness, their world shattered. Jin Yunshan's eyes glowed with longing, with madness, with covetousness. At the same time, he continued to laugh uproariously. Meng Hao, at long last the time has come in which I completely replace you. In that very moment, even as the words left his mouth, a voice spoke out from behind him, a calm and very familiar voice that struck his heart like a bolt of lightning. Long time no see. Chapter 1598, You're Still Here. Long time no see. The voice was calm and completely lacking any sort of emotion, and yet as soon as Jin Yunshan heard it, his heart shook as violently as if it had been struck with lightning bolts. Waves of shock battered his mind, and he couldn't prevent himself from trembling physically. He somehow managed to turn around, and what he saw was a very, very familiar face. It was a face from tens of thousands of years in the past, a face that hadn't changed at all, except for the fact that it seemed vastly more ancient. As soon as Jin Yunshan laid eyes on it, his heart felt as if it would literally explode, and his mind began to reel. Despite the current level of his cultivation base, he was unable to perceive how powerful Meng Hao was, who almost seemed to be fused with the starry sky itself. He was completely unfathomable, and as a result, infinitely mysterious. That led to a suffocating pressure which caused Jin Yunshan to think of the Meng Hao of yesteryear, and how it had felt to stand in his presence. Jin Yunshan shivered, then began to speak haltingly. Why you're still here. He was the only one who could actually see Meng Hao. The mountain and sea realm cultivators could not. They only saw Jin Yunshan turning around with a face as ashen as death. I'm not dead, Meng Hao said coolly. Nor did I have another battle with all heaven, and I most certainly didn't leave this starry sky. Although his gaze was placid to Jin Yunshan, it felt like a barrage of lightning, smashing his mind, battering his transcendent fleshly body, and shattering his transcendent cultivation base. Blood sprayed out of his mouth and he began to back up, chuckling bitterly. A look of madness sprang up in his eyes, and he threw his head back and roared. Impossible, how could you still be here? How is this possible? Tens of thousands of years have passed. Everyone else is dead. It's impossible that you could still be here. Why haven't you left? Why haven't you gone? This starry sky is so small, the universe is so big, why haven't you gone? I should be the lord of this starry sky. I've transcended, why are you still here? Jin Yunshan was going mad. It was impossible for him not to. He had paid an unimaginable price to continue his cultivation down to this day, and was now more than half a step into transcendence. How could he ever have imagined that Meng Hao would suddenly pop up like a horrific nightmare? Well, since you're here, I challenge you to a fight. Roaring in fury, hair in complete disarray, his mental faculties shattered, he drew upon the complete power of his transcendent fleshly body and cultivation base, transforming into a bright beam of light that shot directly toward Meng Hao. Jin Yunshan's eyes were bright red. He was going all out with this attack. It was the type of attack where he would either succeed and come out alive, or die trying. The level of energy he was unleashing was completely unprecedented, and it even caused his soul to climb to a higher level. It was with shocking battle prowess that he closed in rapidly on Meng Hao. The entire time, Meng Hao's face was completely calm. He lifted his right hand and extended a finger. Instantly, everything in front of him went completely calm. Even Jin Yunchen went still. To Meng Hao, Jin Yunchen was like a baby waving a butter knife. "Calm down," he said, lowering his hand. As he did, everything returned to normal. Jin Yunchen was left trembling and coughing up blood. Shock and disbelief filled him as he looked bitterly at Meng Hao. He had no choice but to admit that Meng Hao's strength exceeded even his own powers of imagination. In fact, he was sure that even if he transcended in soul, thus fully stepping into transcendence, that he would still be defeated with a single blow if he tried to fight Meng Hao. What realm are you in?" he stammered. "Even I'm not sure," replied Meng Hao, shaking his head. That was no lie. As of this point, he was unsure of his own level of power. All he knew was that after the tens of thousands of years of augury, after the countless years of secluded meditation, he had reached a level of almost complete omnipotence. All he had to do was think, and he could transform anything into ash. Congratulations on beginning to walk the path of transcendence. Your soul is still lacking, and at the moment it's a deficiency you cannot surpass. Leave. You already possess the power to depart from this starry sky. Go out into the universe and search for the good fortune you need. Perhaps one day you will truly transcend. When Meng Hao looked at Jin Yunchen, he felt no malice or enmity. Everyone he knew had already passed away, and he felt little connection to the current starry sky. The only reason he had appeared to begin with was because the mountain and sea realm was his legacy. Trembling, Jin Yunchen gritted his teeth and said, "I'm not going anywhere." "You refuse to leave, huh?" Meng Hao looked far off into the distance. After some time passed, he looked back at Jin Yunchen, his expression calm. "That's fine, but know this. Whatever progress you make, you will never be able to replace these heavens. You must learn what it means to yield." Meng Hao waved his sleeve, and blood sprayed out of Jin Yunchen's mouth. Rumbling could be heard as he was thrown backward like a kite with its string cut. He spun and spun, flying all the way back to planet Vast Expanse. When he finally came to a stop, he heard Meng Hao's voice speaking coolly in his ear. "Don't show your face for the next 100,000 years." A tremor ran through Jin Yunchen, and all the bravado which had filled him moments ago drained away. He could reject Meng Hao's suggestion to leave this starry sky, but he could not refuse the punishment of 100,000 years of confinement. "Why, I'm almost completely transcended. I should be the lord of this starry sky, and yet, it's like I'm still stuck in the past." Feeling bitter and resentful, Jin Yunchen gritted his teeth and went back into secluded meditation. The crisis facing the mountain and sea realm was resolved. It quickly reverted back to its normal color. Everything had happened so quickly that the mountain and sea realm cultivators were left gaping in shock. They weren't sure exactly what had occurred, but they did see the supremely powerful Jin Yunchen driven away like a stray dog by some invisible power. Many speculations and many stories began to spread. Meng Hao looked around at the mountain and sea realm and then looked outside of it. His gaze pierced through the starry sky until it came to rest in the region outside the vast expanse. It was a sharp gaze, deep, profound, and filled with obsession. It was like a divine being which had finally awoken from slumber. "All heaven," he murmured, "the time has come for our final battle. You've been hiding from me for tens of thousands of years, and I've also been hiding away. It's time to sort things out once and for all." His eyes flickered with icy killing intent as he took a step forward. That single step took him through the void until he was outside of the starry sky. The final battle was about to begin. Expand. Outside the vast expanse, everything looked the same way it had for the past tens of thousands of years. Endless ruins stretched out in all directions, the remnants of former glory. However, there was one location among all the ruins that was like an oasis within a desert. It wasn't very large, only the size of a single mountain. It was clear that the place had once been a sect and had been restored from its state of ruin. It was blanketed in complete and utter silence. Beautifully decorated buildings could be seen on the mountain, but they were empty. However, there was one wooden structure in which a corpse could be seen. It was the corpse of a woman who had long since passed away into meditation. Meng Hao materialized inside of the wooden structure, in front of the corpse. It was immortal Bai Wuchen. Even after Meng Hao told her the truth about what was outside the vast expanse, she had still begged to be sent there. She was obsessed with her illusory memories, and thus, Meng Hao sent her here, with the promise that if she ever wanted to return, she merely had to call upon his name. In the tens of thousands of years that followed, she never called out to him. After seeing the emptiness outside the vast expanse, and the dust, she recalled the home that existed in her memories and found her way back to that very sect. She cleaned it and restored it to the way she remembered, and then lived there quietly, alone. Eventually, she passed away into meditation. Meng Hao stood there looking at Bai Wuchen's corpse for a long, long time. Then he turned and left. She had made her decision. Perhaps in the end she was simply happy to be able to die in the place she remembered. After leaving the mountain, Meng Hao traversed the starry sky outside of the vast expanse until he was hovering near the towering columns. There, his eyes shone with a bright light as he contemplated killing all heaven. He knew that he would only have one chance to succeed. If he managed to slay all heaven, then he would be able to continue to search for a way to break the curse. If he failed, then just like the ghost, the devil, and the god, he would no longer be qualified to remain. "Come out," he said quietly. "We've been putting this battle off for long enough." Although he didn't speak very loudly, his voice filled the entire starry sky outside of the vast expanse. Ripples spread out, a tempest that shook the starry sky as if it were mere water. After a long moment passed, a light sigh could be heard from some distance off. A woman strolled out, wearing a smile and a diaphanous violet garment. Meng Hao didn't seem surprised at all when he saw who it was. "Brother Meng, didn't I say that we would meet again?" Although she didn't seem to be moving very quickly, it only took her a few steps to appear directly in front of Meng Hao. There she stood, a radiant smile on her face. It was none other than Han Bei. "I am the daughter of all heaven and you are his son," she said softly. "We are destined to be together. We are destined to give birth to the Lord of this starry sky, to give birth to the most powerful and ultimate version of all heaven. Why do you refuse to comply?" Her gaze was tender like a ripple on a pond. Meng Hao looked back at her and chuckled. "Which all-heaven transformation are you?" Han Bei frowned. When she didn't respond, he waved his sleeve, and his energy surged in a completely domineering fashion. "All heaven," he said, his voice as cold as ice. "I respect your power. However, respect must be mutual. Where is your respect for me?" His voice was like thunder, echoing out with such power that the starry sky trembled on the verge of collapse. Han Bei's eyes flashed. Any tenderness which had been present faded away, replaced by an icy glow. "I'm the 8th transformation," she said. With that, she reached out and waved her finger. Instantly, the void between her and Meng Hao distorted. At the same time, Meng Hao vanished, reappearing a moment later directly in front of Han Bei. He also reached out and waved his finger. Their fingers touched, and a boom echoed out that could end the heavens and crush the earth. Meng Hao's expression never changed, but Han Bei's face flickered, and she involuntarily fell back. Booms began to echo out as different parts of her body began to explode. Blood and gore blasted out in all directions until she was completely soaked in crimson. Her appearance was shocking, ferocious, and ghastly. "Meng Hao!" she screamed, transforming into a blood-colored beam of light that shot toward Meng Hao. As she approached, she reached out as if to grab him. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the void around Meng Hao shattered. And yet, he didn't seem to be affected at all. He looked coldly at Han Bei, then extended his hand, causing a tempest to spring up and slam into her. Han Bei's eyes widened in shock. The astonishing level of power that Meng Hao was utilizing left her in complete disbelief. Before she could even react, Meng Hao took a step forward, clenched his hand into a fist, and punched her in the pit of her stomach. She screamed miserably as her body exploded. A moment later, she reformed, and yet before she could do anything, Meng Hao was upon her again, unleashing another fist strike. She exploded again, and the process was repeated. Every time she reformed, he punched again. 10 times, dozens, 100. Boom, boom, boom. "Show me your real power, all heaven. If this is all you're capable of, I'll definitely be disappointed." Meng Hao's cultivation base surged. His next fist strike became a sea of flames, filled with infinite destructive power, power that could wither all life force. It became a flood of decay, filled with all of the power of the 5 elements, a fist strike of ultimate destruction. A huge boom could be heard as Han Bei exploded into countless chunks of blood and gore that splashed about in all directions. Because of the power of the 5 elements that filled the chunks of her body, it made it very difficult for her to form back together. Meng Hao's words were still lingering in the air when another voice spoke out from the gore that remained of Han Bei. However, the voice was not Han Bei's. It was vague, even faint, and yet it filled the entire starry sky. "Meng Hao, The eighth, all-heaven transformation is the primeval transformation. Countless years ago in primeval times, the first transcender within my starry sky was he who I dubbed the ghost. Come forth. Rumble. Chapter 1599, Eighth All-Heaven Transformation. Chapter 1600, I Am the Ghost. Click here for the soundtrack. Even as All-Heaven's voice echoed out, the chunks of gore and drops of blood transformed into ash, vanishing completely. A blue-violet beam of light appeared off in the distance, moving at incredible speed. By the time Meng Hao turned to face it, it was right in front of him. A single finger became visible, racing toward his chest. Just before it touched him, Meng Hao's Dao eye opened, emitting a blast of light that slammed into the finger. A boom echoed out and Meng Hao staggered backward, his entire body vibrating, his face flushed bright red. When he looked back up, his eyes shone with piercingly bright light and the desire to do battle. "That's what I'm talking about," he said slowly. "Don't hold anything back. This fight will be to the death." A figure appeared in front of him, someone very familiar to him. It was a middle-aged man with long gray hair. He wore a gray-colored robe and seemed to radiate disdain as he hovered there looking at Meng Hao. He had an aura of transcendence, and closer examination revealed that it was something beyond ordinary. It was actually half a step into the ancestor realm, just like Meng Hao's aura from years past. In fact, this aura was even more mysterious. This person was none other than the same person Meng Hao had first laid eyes upon in the necropolis of the Vast Expanse School, Patriarch Vast Expanse. He was the first person to ever transcend in this starry sky, the person who all heaven had come to call the ghost. His expression was cold, but there didn't appear to be any intelligence in his eyes whatsoever. The pressure that radiated off of him seemed capable of cowing the entire starry sky, and behind him was an enormous, illusory figure, matchlessly vicious, overflowing with a ghostly aura. It possessed a boundless dignity, as if it were the emperor of all ghosts. All Heaven's eighth transformation, the primeval transformation, was a grand magic that only All Heaven's true self could utilize. It was a Tao the likes of which a mere clone could not unleash. It allowed him to duplicate the most powerful experts of the starry sky that existed within his memories. The first duplicate had been Han Bei, who wasn't necessarily very powerful, but had a strong connection to Meng Hao. Now, after having borne witness to Meng Hao's terrifying power, All Heaven didn't hesitate for even a moment to use the full power of his eighth transformation to duplicate the ghost. The first transcender of this starry sky looked coldly at Meng for a moment before suddenly taking a step forward. It was with incredible speed that his right index finger shot out toward Meng Hao's forehead, where his Dao eye was located. Meng Hao had no time to evade, so he didn't even attempt to do so. Even as the finger stabbed into his Dao eye, sending intense pain shooting through him, his right hand flashed with an incantation gesture as he unleashed the eighth demon sealing hex. A sealing mark fell upon the ghost, and at the same time, blood oozed down Meng Hao's face. The ghost lurched to a halt as his body and spirit were locked into place by the hexing magic. Considering the current level of Meng Hao's cultivation base, the eighth hex was something that few people in existence could remain unaffected by. As the ghost was locked in place, Meng Hao moved forward in a blur, body slamming him and simultaneously striking out with first his finger, then his fist, 3 blows in fast succession. Blood sprayed out of the ghost's mouth as his chest caved in. The finger and 2 fists were all aimed at his forehead, which shattered immediately. However, the scorn in his eyes remained exactly the same as before, causing Meng Hao's heart to begin to thump. It was at this point that the enormous, 30,000-meter-tall ghost emperor suddenly became completely corporeal. Looking completely and utterly vicious, it lunged toward Meng Hao as if to consume him. A sensation of deadly crisis filled Meng Hao's mind. He could tell that if this ghost emperor actually managed to lay its teeth on him, although he might not be killed, he would definitely lose the battle. And if he lost the battle, he would lose his qualifications to be able to fight All Heaven ever again. Of course, All Heaven was doing this on purpose, trying to force him to use as many of his hexing magics as possible. In fact, he wanted to force Meng Hao to use his most terrifying hex, the Seal the Heavens hex. If he did, then All Heaven could duplicate it and thus never fear it again. I have other tricks up my sleeve besides the Seal the Heavens hex. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed with a strange light as the void behind him suddenly distorted. A piercing cry echoed out as a figure just as large as the ghost emperor appeared. It had green skin and a solitary wicked horn. It had explosive demonic chi and heaven-shaking, earth-shattering energy. This was Meng Hao's life essence form, the foundation of his cultivation base, the demon sovereign. When the demon sovereign appeared, it immediately began to fight the ghost emperor. The ghost emperor latched its jaws onto the demon sovereign, who stabbed back into the ghost emperor's body with hands like blades. RUMMMBLLLE. The fighting was shaking everything in existence. Countless ruins in the area were transformed into ash. As the gigantic figures fought up above, Meng Hao and the ghost brawled down below. After exchanging over 1,000 blows, blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth, and the ghost was drenched with gore. The two appeared to be very well matched. This ghost is from the memories of all heaven, a version of him from the past when he was at the peak of his power. From this alone, I can see that the ghost was no ordinary transcender. Meng Hao wiped the blood from his mouth, then waved his right hand to unleash the mountain-consuming incantation. Numerous mountains began to descend, forming a chain that swept across the battlefield. The ghost snorted coldly, then became a blur as he unleashed countless clones, which then shot toward the descending mountains and shattered them. Meng Hao's right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, causing the rubble of the mountains to transform into an enormous stone fist. As the fist smashed toward the ghost, Meng Hao sped forward like a shooting star, merging with the fist, lending it even more explosive power. "Gate of the Ghost Realm," the ghost said, eyes shining with mysterious light. He raised both hands overhead, and the stars shook as a huge rift opened up above, revealing an enormous pitch-black gate. As the gate descended, it slowly opened, revealing a gigantic scaled hand. The hand stretched out, and Meng Hao could sense incredible pressure, making it seem as if this hand could look down on all creation. The hand immediately grabbed hold of the enormous stone fist, then squeezed down. A boom could be heard as the stone hand shattered. Meng Hao appeared but quickly vanished, reappearing some distance off, his eyes flashing. 8th Demon Sealing Hex, Body-Mind Hexing. Lock down the void, the starry sky and natural laws. Lock down everything I desire to lock down. It has begun. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSTH on Twitter. Click here for soundtrack. The 8th Demon Sealing Hex was the first of the hexing magics that he had mastered, and the one he had used the most often. It was also the first hexing magic that gave birth to an essence for him. The power of the essence of space, once fully unleashed, was terrifying to the extreme. And of course, considering the current level of Meng Hao's cultivation base, he could utilize the 8th hex to the ultimate degree. Anything which he saw could be rendered as a painting. Thus, anything Meng Hao could see could be sealed if he wished it to be. Rumbling echoed out as the 8th hex was unleashed. To Meng Hao, the entire starry sky became a canvas painting, even the gate of the ghost realm, and even the ghostly hand stretching out from within it. When the hexing magic was unleashed, the starry sky shook and trembled. "Break," he said, his eyes flickering with killing intent. The canvas shattered and the black, ghostly hand exploded. The enormous gate of the ghost realm also shattered, shredded to pieces along with the canvas. The ghost was trembling on the verge of collapse, his face twisted and distorted as he threw his head back and howled. The vicious ghost emperor behind him was about to fight back when Meng Hao called up the full power of his cultivation base to fuel the 8th hex. "I still haven't used my Seal the Heavens hex, but neither have I used my battle weapon. If I can't beat the duplicate of a transcender from all heaven's memories, then how could I possibly qualify to stand on an equal footing with the real ghost?" "Break." His eyes shone with cold light as he made a violent ripping motion with his hands. The ghost couldn't hold out any longer, and the ghost emperor was starting to collapse. However, the sensation of deadly crisis within Meng Hao continued to grow with wild speed. Without any hesitation, he lurched to the side. At the same time, a black beam of light stabbed through his right shoulder. His right arm was completely vaporized and blood shot out of the stump like a geyser. Then he vanished, to reappear further off in the distance. At the same time, a frigid aura of death rose up, and a finger appeared, which stabbed directly toward Meng Hao. His eyes shone with brilliant light, and he let out a powerful shout, causing the void and the starry sky around him to collapse, transforming into a wild tempest. Behind him, the image of the demon sovereign let out a roar of rage as it barreled toward the incoming finger. In that very same moment, a cold snort echoed out as another equally large figure materialized out of thin air. It was pitch black and looked very similar to a demon, and yet lacked any sort of multifariousness. It was ancient, rife with death. It was a devil specter. Rumbling could be heard as the demon sovereign and the devil specter clashed, and a shockwave blasted out. Meng Hao fell back again, blood spraying out of his mouth. Having slipped out of the trap which had been set, he looked up, and his arm rapidly reformed. He was now staring, not at the devil specter with its majestic devilish chi, but the young man in the black robe hovering beneath it. His features were ordinary, but he had strange black markings on his face, and he emanated a wild and barbaric air. The devil, Meng Hao said. He had never laid eyes on this young man before, but recognized him instantly. This was the second person to transcend in the starry sky of the vast expanse, Chuman Tai's master from the Devil Realm continent. In the moment when Meng Hao had been about to destroy the Ghost Emperor, this young man had made his move, injuring Meng Hao. Without Meng Hao controlling it, his eighth hex collapsed, and the sealing mark on the ghost began to fade away. It wouldn't be long before he was free of his bonds. When that happened, Meng Hao would be up against both the ghost and the devil at the same time. "I don't like being called the devil," said the black-robed young man. "You can call me Su Ming." His eyes shone with a bizarre light, and the black markings on his face suddenly writhed as they grew and expanded. Even as the words left his mouth, he extended his right hand, and rumbling sounds echoed out as he began to change shape, transforming into an enormous tree with countless rustling branches. The tree began to fly toward Meng Hao, whose eyes shone with a profound desire to fight. As he watched what was happening, he suddenly laughed. "Many thanks to you, All Heaven, for giving me the chance to fight the most powerful people from the past. I'm very interested to find out if they are stronger than me or weaker." He transformed into a blur, which shot toward the black-robed man. As he closed in, his hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, causing a sea of flames to rise up around him. In the space of a single breath of time, it turned violet as the demon sovereign once again appeared. The demon sovereign and the devil specter clashed, and Meng Hao began to fight with Su Ming. Both of them were equally fast. They didn't make contact with each other, but fought with magical techniques and divine abilities. The starry sky shattered and the void collapsed. Seemingly endless varieties of divine abilities were unleashed in a very short time. Then Su Ming suddenly took a step forward, whereupon his energy began to rise higher. Then he took a second step, a third, and a fourth. Laughing loudly, Meng Hao also began to walk. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4. They closed in on each other rapidly, and by the time they both took their 7th steps, their energy had reached an unimaginable level. The void in front of Su Ming shattered as a huge foot descended toward Meng Hao. However, Meng Hao's 7th step resulted in exactly the same thing. BOOMM. An ear-splitting boom echoed out. Blood sprayed out of the mouths of both Su Ming and Meng Hao as they were sent tumbling away from each other. And yet, just a moment later, they were flying back toward each other to fight. Apparently, they were completely evenly matched. Unfortunately, Meng Hao had the feeling that both the ghost and the devil had trump cards that they had yet to play, similar to his own seal, the Heaven's Hex. Although, perhaps the truth was that All Heaven's memory didn't contain perfect copies of them. After all Heaven was currently weaker than he had ever been. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he once again unleashed the 8th demon sealing hex. As expected, his opponent was locked down, allowing Meng Hao an opening to attack. Their battle was causing the starry sky to shake, and transforming nearby ruins into nothing more than rubble. It was in this very moment that the ghost howled and ripped apart the spatial ceiling. Then, he slowly turned to look at Meng Hao. Without any hesitation, he joined the battle. His first move was a fist strike which caused seemingly infinite ghost images to spring up, which then converged back into his fist. In the blink of an eye, the ghost's single fist strike became infinitely more powerful. Chapter 16:01 You Can Call Me, Su Ming. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSDH on Twitter. /expand. Click here for soundtrack. This fist strike of innumerable ghost images did not rely on raw power, but rather speed. It was caused by tens of thousands of punches that moved so quickly that countless afterimages sprang up, and yet created an illusion of being only a single punch. Meng Hao was shocked. He could defend against this fist strike, but to do so while simultaneously dealing with Su Ming meant that he would be facing both the ghost and the devil, placing him in incredible danger. As the fist closed in, Meng Hao howled, drawing upon all of the power of his cultivation base to defend himself. A boom echoed out and blood sprayed out of his mouth. Even as he was sent flying, Su Ming closed in and cast a divine ability. Meng Hao's expression was extremely unsightly as he coughed up more blood. He had lost the initiative, and at the moment there was no opportunity to get it back. The ghost was currently bearing down with another fist strike. Meng Hao was being beaten back relentlessly by the combined efforts of the ghost and the devil. His hair was in disarray, and he looked to be in very bad condition. He fell back again and again, and it truly seemed as if he were about to meet utter defeat. Clearly, All Heaven didn't just want to win. He wanted to consume Meng Hao, to use him to complete himself. He still hadn't given up on his plan to use Meng Hao for his nirvanic rebirth. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the Ghost Emperor and the Devil Spectre knocked down Meng Hao's demon sovereign. Even as they prepared to destroy it completely, a cold snort echoed out. The ghost's eyes flickered with killing intent. Raising both hands up above him, he once again summoned the gate of the ghost realm. The black hand appeared again, reaching for Meng Hao with desolate madness. At the same time, Su Ming's eyes flickered with killing intent, and the black marks seemed to almost completely overtake his face. He also raised his hands into the air, and shockingly, a mountain appeared behind him. It had 5 peaks that looked like fingers, and at its base was a tribal stockade. Furthermore, hovering in the air above the mountain was a blood-colored moon. An aura erupted from the illusory image, an aura that could shake heaven and earth, an aura with the power to destroy everything. It was as if that entire world were crushing down onto Meng Hao, and as it neared, it merged with the gate of the ghost realm. The starry sky in the vicinity was transformed in all aspects. Meng Hao had long since imagined how difficult the final battle with All Heaven would be, but he could never have guessed that things would turn out this way. Furthermore, All Heaven hadn't truly appeared yet. This was only his 8th transformation. At the same time, Meng Hao had to remain constantly on the alert for someone who had yet to make an appearance. The god. Suddenly, Meng Hao looked around to find that he was in a different place. Shockingly, heaven and earth had become a barbaric and savage place. It was as if he had been transported back into ancient times. Far off in the distance was a mountain that resembled a hand, beneath which was a tribal stockade. A blood-colored moon hung in the sky, and there was also a huge gate visible, out of which poured countless ghosts. The ghosts formed into the shape of a huge black hand that stretched out toward him. Suddenly, the blood moon exploded, transforming into innumerable blood-colored bats which also sped toward Meng Hao, squealing in high-pitched shrieks. However, things weren't over yet. Everything around him distorted as if the world itself were his enemy. Everything began to shrink down, apparently intent on grinding him into dust. At the same time, people were pouring out of the tribal stockade and charging toward him. Everything in this entire world, from the blades of grass to the trees, were all becoming weapons of murder, attempting to kill him. Meng Hao looked around quietly, his eyes glowing red. Then he began to laugh uproariously. It was a demonic laughter, and it matched his facial expression, which flickered between something domineering, something fierce, something righteous, and something evil. Then he waved his right hand and yelled, "Parrot." Instantly, a high-pitched squawk rang out as the parrot appeared. Next came the copper mirror, which now had a pearl on it. It was none other than the pearl dong who had given to Meng Hao before dying. After fusing into the copper mirror, it made the mirror vastly more powerful than it already was. The parrot and the copper mirror instantly melted, covering his arm and then spreading out over his entire body as a suit of armor. A pitch-black battle weapon appeared, vicious to the extreme, 9 meters long and utterly shocking. A red cape billowed out behind Meng Hao, as his cultivation base power was bolstered by the power of the copper mirror. "Ghost and devil, so what?" he said, slowly floating up into the air. He raised the battle weapon above his head with his right hand and laughed, his expression flickering with multifarious transformations, his eyes glowing bright red. "You shall be severed," he roared. Gripping the hilt of the battle weapon with both his left and right hands, he looked out at the world around him, and viciously slashed down with the blade. A huge rift was torn open in the land, which spread out to fill the entire world. The ghostly hand was destroyed, and the blood-colored sky was shattered. The blood-colored bats were ripped to shreds, and the charging tribe members were eradicated. The 5-peaked mountain was torn apart. All heaven and earth were completely sundered. BOOMM. The whole world was completely and utterly split in two, then collapsed into fragments. Meng Hao could again see the destroyed area that was the outside of the vast expanse. The ruins in the area were now nothing more than dust and ash. The ghost and the devil were both coughing up blood as they were forced backward by Meng Hao's blast of energy. As of this moment, Meng Hao's surging energy was sending brightly colored light flashing throughout all creation, filling all heaven's heart with dread. He hovered there, clad in vicious-looking armor, the battle weapon vibrating slightly. He was panting slightly, and every inhalation seemed to make the starry sky shrink. Hefting the battle weapon, eyes gleaming as if he were prepared to toss caution to the wind, he spoke out in a hoarse voice, "The god is the final part of the 8th transformation. When will you be showing your face?" Almost instantly, a cold snort echoed out, and a figure descended from above with lightning speed. Stars swirled on his forehead, and he wore a long white robe. His hair was also white, and his expression was completely merciless. The most murderous of auras overflowed from within him. Meng Hao had seen this face before. It was the same face as the statue on the immortal god continent, and was also exactly the same as Slaughter's face. The only difference was that, as Meng Hao well knew, the god, the devil, and the ghost whom he faced were not the true versions of those beings. These were simply puppets created by all heaven, based on his memories. Meng Hao looked at the god, then threw his head back and laughed uproariously. His desire to fight only continued to grow. Chapter 1602, The God Descends. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSDH on Twitter. Chapter 1603, Peak Battle. Click here for soundtrack. As soon as the god appeared with his towering murderous aura, a huge vortex sprang up behind him. He was the only one among the group who had no gigantic humanoid image behind him. He descended with incredible speed, simultaneously waving his right hand. A razor-sharp wind spike shot out which contained boundless destructive power. In the blink of an eye, it was directly in front of Meng Hao. Meng Hao's eyes glittered brightly as he prepared to utilize the 8th hex to stop it. However, in the very moment that the spike appeared, a cold snort echoed out through the starry sky. Immobilize. A tremor ran through Meng Hao as he suddenly lost all ability to fight. His pupils constricted as the wind spike smashed into the battle armor. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and he fell back. The god closed in on him, waving his hand to summon a pitch-black wind, which was none other than the magic of Call the Wind. This version of the magic was vastly more powerful than the version Meng Hao had faced all those years ago, when he had fought the immortal god continent. It was a destructive wind that could extinguish any and all forms of life. However, even as the wind screamed, Meng Hao lifted the battle weapon above his head and slashed it down viciously, cutting the wind in half. Despite being cut in half, the wind didn't vanish. Instead, it transformed into countless black raindrops, and then moments later, numerous fierce imps. Next came power that could crumble mountains and collapse lands. The entire starry sky around Meng Hao was being destroyed. The image of a moon appeared on Meng Hao, and the god let out a cold harumph. A boom echoed out as large sections of Meng Hao's battle armor exploded. Even as blood sprayed out of his mouth, the ghost bore down on him with incredible speed, summoning the ghost specter, which reached out to grab him. Meng Hao was knocked backward again, coughing up more blood. Su Ming, the devil, also appeared, unleashing a completely different divine ability than before, striking Meng Hao's chest with a bizarre power that seemed capable of consuming his essences. A boom echoed out as Meng Hao fell back yet again. Next came the god, with a fist strike that distorted reality and could destroy all things. Meng Hao was yet again injured severely. He almost seemed incapable of fighting back. The word immobilize reverberated yet again, once again rendering him incapable of movement. The ghost, the devil, and the god continued to batter him nonstop. Meng Hao wasn't even aware of how much blood had sprayed out of his mouth. His bones were shattered, and he was in a state of constant retreat, having been beaten from one corner of the starry sky to the other. He could easily handle any one of these opponents alone, and could have held his own against two. But to face three at the same time was impossible, not without using the Seal the Heavens hex. In his current weakened state, all heaven might not be able to duplicate their most powerful trump cards, but these three were the most powerful experts of their respective generations. When they joined forces, even all heaven in his prime would be left trembling. They might be people from the past, but they were still capable of unleashing power that could shake heaven and earth. But Meng Hao wasn't ready to give up yet. He continued to fight. He used the true self-Tao, the mountain-consuming incantation, the 9 heavens destruction, the 7 god steps, as well as magical techniques of his own creation and divine abilities from Shui Dongliu's legacy. He used everything, even natural laws. The fight with these 3 figures of legend was shaking everything. No such battle like this had ever taken place within the starry sky. The bitter intensity of the combat was something that would leave anyone shocked. Meng Hao was seriously injured, but he had a transcendent fleshly body and could recover rapidly. Of course, it was the same with his three opponents. That only served to make the battle more intense. The god was especially incisive in his attacks. Eventually, he waved his right hand, causing the entire starry sky to turn pitch black. Shockingly, a sun appeared, something so bright that it seemed capable of destroying all of the darkness of night. Things weren't over yet. The stars on the god's forehead began to spin. However, no image appeared. Instead, he began to rapidly grow larger, transforming himself into a god who punched out with power to destroy the stars. In his entire life, Meng Hao had never fought a battle as difficult as this one. Any other person in his position would have been in despair by now, would have been sapped of the desire to fight back, and would have been destroyed. But not Meng Hao. He held on. He had long since come to the realization that this eighth transformation wasn't without limits. At the same time, all heaven was also being weakened severely. All heaven was trying to force him to use the seal the heavens hex, and Meng Hao wanted to use this chance to try to force the already weakened all heaven to exhaust more of his remaining power. Seemingly endless booms rang out. The combined attacks of his three opponents had left Meng Hao's battle armor in ruins. Many portions were completely ripped apart. His battle weapon was also severely damaged. But he held on. Roaring, he summoned the demon sovereign, which took on the ghost emperor and the devil specter. Fists flew. Somehow, Meng Hao extricated himself from all of the deadly situations. As he retreated, he laughed. He was soaked in blood and yet felt no despair. In fact, his laughter continued to grow more sonorous. "It's been a long time since I've had a good fight," he said. "Tens of thousands of years, in fact." His battle armor was in tatters, and his hair was in wild disarray. But he hefted his battle weapon and looked more than ever like he wanted to do battle. It was at this point that the ghost took a deep breath and waved his right hand. His entire body began to turn transparent, and his ghost chi skyrocketed. "Unorthodox magic, ghost Tao," he said softly. He instantly vanished, becoming a ghostly specter that shot toward Meng Hao with the most deadly level of power he had used in the battle so far. However, Meng Hao could see that the Taoist magic being utilized by the ghost was incomplete, flawed. It had nothing to do with the ghost himself, but rather the fact that this was an incomplete duplicate created by all heaven, and that this Taoist magic was being forcibly unleashed. The devil closed his eyes, then opened them again. His entire body was now covered with complex black marks. He let out a soft breath, and a hellish aura exploded out from him. It transformed into a special type of possession magic, which bore down threateningly on Meng Hao. Possession. This was also an incomplete magic. Last was the god, who waved his sleeve and coolly said, "The Tao of the god, warrior among all cultivators. The magic of the demon, a flame to ignite the heavens. The tribulation of the devil, a calamity of death." It was yet again an incomplete magic. As soon as the words left the god's mouth, heaven-shaking, earth-shattering energy erupted out from all three of the group. The starry sky seemed to vanish, leaving behind only them and their incomplete trump cards. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSTH on Twitter. The winners for best comment will be announced along with the raffle winners sometime after the contest. Thanks for the great comments. I'm having a tough time picking my favorite. Click here for the soundtrack. Even though they were incomplete Taoist magics, considering they were being powered by these three individuals, they were powerful to a degree that was difficult to describe even with words. The entire starry sky outside the vast expanse was shaking violently. In fact, even the inner starry sky seemed on the verge of collapse. Meng Hao's pupils constricted. He knew that all heaven was getting very anxious in his attempt to force the usage of his seal the heavens hex, and was obviously willing to pay the highest of prices to do so. However, as of this moment, Meng Hao knew that if he didn't use that hex, he would definitely die. Even transcenders could be killed. "You want to see it? Fine, I'll show you. My ninth hex, the seal the heavens hex." His eyes shone with radiant light like that of the sun and moon. He took a deep breath and the starry sky around him began to shake. He stretched his arms out and everything around him shattered. At the same time, a statue appeared in front of him, as well as a sword. The statue shone with dazzling light that filled the starry sky. It slowly lifted the sword, a sword both ancient and bizarre, something filled with power that didn't seem appropriate within the starry sky. That was because its power exceeded the entire starry sky's capacity to contain it. The statue and the sword were causing everything outside the vast expanse to shake violently. At the same time, Meng Hao's three opponents seemed to fade slightly. Light spilled out from within the statue and, with Meng Hao at the center, surged out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it filled everything in existence. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the darkness was driven away. Outside the vast expanse, everything was shining brightly. The light was so bright that it even pierced the barriers to shine inside the vast expanse. An indescribably domineering will was rising up from the statue, and from Meng Hao. It was a domineering air that said, "What I want, the heavens shall not lack. What I don't want had better not exist in the heavens." It was a madness that said, "My words are reality." The light almost seemed to be peeling off a layer of skin that existed within the starry sky. The three powerful figures from all heaven's memories were rapidly fading away, and their divine abilities seemed to be on the verge of vanishing. The entire starry sky was filled with explosive rumbling sounds. This was Meng Hao's seal, the heaven's hex, his most powerful Taoist magic, his trump card. As the boundless light shone out, Meng Hao dropped his left hand and pushed up with his right, stretching it high into the starry sky. Everything shook, and all of the boundless light began to converge on his hand. In the blink of an eye, a character came to be visible there. It was the character Seal. Instantly, an indescribably powerful gravitational force appeared, causing all natural and magical laws, all entities, all wills, to be uncontrollably sucked in. The starry sky was in complete chaos, and Meng Hao's three powerful opponents were starting to shake. Strange light could be seen in their eyes, as, without any hesitation, they continued to propel their divine abilities toward Meng Hao. Ghost talons brimmed with energy, a devilish death aura shook everything. The god Tao sent boundless magical flames surging out. The power almost instantly threatened to overwhelm Meng Hao. But then Meng Hao's eyes glittered and he quietly said, "Seal the heavens hex." Instantly, the seal character began to expand, shining with scintillating light, causing intense rumbling sounds to fill the starry sky. The character grew larger and larger, until it was so large that it seemed big enough to seal all the heavens. Then it slammed into the Taoist magics of the three transcenders. Ear-splitting crashing could be heard as the ghost's divine ability was crushed and transformed into ash, which was then sucked into the seal character. The exact same thing happened to the devil's possession power and the god's powerful magic. These incomplete Taoist magics could not stand up at all to the seal the heavens hex. The eyes of all three transcenders seemed to fill with madness as they transformed into three beams of heaven-shaking, earth-shattering light. All of them called upon the power of their own essences to fly at top speed toward the seal character. In the blink of an eye, they all collided, and the starry sky was shaken so violently it seemed as if it might explode. The three transcenders' bodies twisted and distorted as though they were being blasted by a wind of destruction that was wiping them out of existence. At the same time, the intense power of their attack caused cracks to appear on the constantly expanding seal character. Even still, the three transcenders were shoved backward. No matter how all heaven struggled to force them into action, the power of the seal the heavens hex could not be resisted. It became a wild wind that swept over everything. Meng Hao's eyes were bloodshot, and a powerful roar erupted from his mouth as he sealed everything present. The three transcenders were not their true selves, but rather duplicates created by all heaven. They had incomplete Taoist magics and were themselves incomplete. Because of that, blood sprayed out of their mouths, and they trembled on the verge of being destroyed. A moment later, something like a roar of fury echoed out as the three transcenders exploded. The eighth all-heaven transformation had been completely broken by the seal the heavens hex. The three transcenders became black threads that, despite the power of the seal the heavens hex, converged together into the vague shape of an eye. It was the eye of the all-heaven, glaring furiously at Meng Hao, completely bloodshot. Meng Hao. Even as the muffled voice filled the starry sky, Meng Hao's eyes flickered with killing intent, and he waved his hand. The sword which had appeared moments ago slashed down, and the starry sky was rent asunder. A gargantuan, boundless gash ripped open, snaking out at top speed toward the eye of all heaven. When it slammed into the eye was slashed in half. The power of the sword was boundlessly domineering, shockingly sharp, capable of piercing through anything. It sailed through the starry sky, its true target being one of the two pillars that seemed to prop up all existence, the pillar representing the demon. Rumble! It didn't pause for even a moment before directly slashing into the pillar. Within the starry sky of the vast expanse, it had been countless years ago that the ghost destroyed one of the pillars. Later, the devil destroyed a second pillar, and the god, a third. Now Meng Hao was using the seal the heavens hex to destroy the fourth pillar. BOOMM. Chapter 1604, Destroying All Heaven's Finger. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSDH on Twitter. The winners for best comment will be announced along with the raffle winners sometime after the contest. Thanks for the great comments. I'm having a tough time picking my favorite. Chapter 1605, Final All Heaven Transformation. Click here for soundtrack. Meng Hao had previously used a lesser version of the seal the heavens hex on the demon pillar, leaving a huge crack on it. Now that the complete seal the heavens hex was exploding out with incredible power, that crack grew larger, sending even more cracks out, filling the entire pillar. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the demon pillar then shattered into pieces, into countless chunks of rubble which began to shower down like rain. At the same time, a roar of fury echoed out through the starry sky. Then, within the brilliant light cast by the seal the heavens hex, something like an enormous hand appeared, which began to tear open a rift in the starry sky. A boundlessly ancient aura erupted out, as well as dense vast expanse mist. Simultaneously, an enormous eye emerged from within the rift. Meng Hao was instantly able to tell that the eye was not illusory. It was all heaven's true form. Its ancient aura was not something that could be falsified, nor could the incredible sensation of weakness that it radiated. Most importantly, Meng Hao could sense the aura of the starry sky upon it. He was all heaven, the former lord of the starry sky, the reason why all living beings could practice cultivation. It was because of him that people could even transcend, and he had offered intelligence and civilization to the beings in the starry sky countless years in the past. Long ago, everything had been happy and harmonious, but then he had weakened, and as he neared death, he went mad. Meng Hao watched the eye of all heaven, his archenemy, fly out from the rift. As soon as Meng Hao sensed how weak he was, he sighed. "You finally reveal yourself," he said. All heaven stared back at him with hatred and other mixed emotions, but mostly coldness. "I came from afar, and when I arrived, this place was nothing but chaos. The beings here had no intelligence and lived on base instinct alone. It was me. I was the one who changed everything. Why must you resist me? I provided the path of cultivation for all beings. You should be thanking me. I was also the one who protected this entire starry sky, allowing it to grow and prosper within the universe. Why can't you be content with that? I was the one who created the natural laws here. I replaced the mindless will that existed here. I became the lord of this starry sky." The voice of all heaven seemed melancholy, and yet it boomed like thunder. "I created all of you. I created everything. Therefore, when I am in need, you should repay me. That is the natural law of the universe. Why must you struggle? You should never have reached this state. I need the power of your nirvanic rebirth. I need you as fuel. I need you to die." As all heaven's words of fury echoed out, an indescribable pressure exploded out, causing the starry sky to tremble. The light from Meng Hao's seal the heavens hex was instantly crushed and began to dissipate. If Meng Hao had never used the seal the heavens hex before, such a thing wouldn't have happened. All heaven would never have been able to crush the hex without having first seen it in use. But having been able to observe it earlier, he could remember it, duplicate it, and destroy it. That was why he was now revealing himself. He was weak, on the verge of dying completely, and thus had acted with extreme caution before. But now, he was completely confident regarding the seal the heavens hex. Meng Hao sighed quietly. It was hard for him to come to terms with exactly how he felt about all heaven. However, there was one thing that could never change. All heaven had plotted against him for his entire life. He had been responsible for destroying the mountain and sea realm. To Meng Hao, the feeling of being manipulated and controlled went against his Tao. His Tao was that of freedom and independence. He desired to be unrestrained and unfettered for all eternity. "We have different Taos," he said, eyes shining with a strange, cold light. With that, he extended his right hand, causing the aura of the seal the heavens hex to explode out, sending boundless light out in all directions. "We have different Taos." Deep within all heaven's eye was a profound arrogance and an even stronger killing intent. The way for him to change everything was to consume Meng Hao. By consuming Meng Hao, he could live again. But now he was weak. He had reached the point where he could only make a single attack. If that attack didn't kill Meng Hao, then he himself would have no other choice than to die. "One attack will be enough," he said, his voice echoing out into the starry sky as something pitch black appeared within his gaze. Ninth transformation. All heaven transformation. In response to all heaven's voice, the starry sky outside the vast expanse collapsed. Everything withered up as vast quantities of energy began to converge upon the eye. Instantly, all heaven's energy began to rise, and the pressure he exuded grew vastly more intense. It was as if the starry sky itself were transforming into an ocean of fury, and Meng Hao was a little boat floating on the waves, battered by the rain, in danger of sinking down into the depths. He could sense a level of madness that far exceeded what he had sensed from the three transcenders. He was left shaking, and felt almost like he was a mere mortal facing the power of all heaven and earth. The starry sky collapsed and withered, and power poured into the eye of all heaven. As the eye stared furiously at Meng Hao, veins began to spread out from it, forming what looked like the overall shape of a human body. Soon, the outline of a person began to take shape in front of Meng Hao. The outline was not unfamiliar. Meng Hao had seen this very thing years ago when he looked inside the demon pillar. The enormous shape was now forming in front of him, complete with the 98 shocking fruits. Those fruits then collapsed, spreading out to cover the outline of blood vessels. A scream of fury echoed out as, unexpectedly, another eye appeared. A face could now be seen, complete with facial features. There were also 4 limbs. The change happened rapidly. As the starry sky collapsed and withered, life force and power converged onto the 9th transformation, feeding and fueling it. This was the 9th transformation, the true all-heaven transformation. Most accurately speaking, this was the complete all-heaven. Rumbling sounds echoed out in all directions, as well as sounds like howls of rage. Meng Hao began to pant. He suddenly felt completely unstable, as if the mere energy radiating off of all heaven was enough to beat him back over and over again. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSDH on Twitter. The winners for best comment will be announced along with the raffle winners sometime after the contest. Thanks for the great comments. I'm having a tough time picking my favorite. Chapter 1606, Hex vs. Hex. Click here for soundtrack. Meng Hao, the muffled voice filled the starry sky, seemingly echoing out from the most ancient of times. At the same time, it was unmistakably clear and boomed like thunder. Meng Hao watched as the huge image of all heaven formed together. The blood vessels grew more numerous, bones appeared, and then flesh and blood. At the same time, a powerful energy radiated out, an explosive energy of almost indescribable power. It was as if some giant who had once dissipated into the void was now reforming. All heaven might only be capable of unleashing a single attack, but as of this moment, that impending attack filled Meng Hao with an indescribable sensation of deadly crisis. He was well aware that if his opponent continued to grow stronger, it would spell certain defeat. Killing intent flickered in his eyes as he watched all heaven forming together. He quickly spread his arms wide and roared, "Ninth demon sealing hex, seal the heavens hex." Wind screamed around him, and the statue appeared once again. Boundless light began to spread out, which then surged toward all heaven with deadly force. Meng Hao was going all out with his cultivation base, his will, and his soul, fueling the seal the heavens hex to the ultimate degree. Blinding light shone as power which could seal all existence bore down on all heaven. The starry sky inside the vast expanse withered some as Meng Hao drew upon it as a further component of power within the seal, the heavens hex. The white light which closed in on all heaven contained heaven-sealing power, power from beyond the starry sky, power which contained the natural laws of the universe. The battle was reaching a climax, with both parties unleashing unimaginable power. When the seal character landed on all heaven, his hair rose up, and his eyes shone with unprecedented brightness. Although his body hadn't completely formed yet, he was surging with power that could shake heaven and earth. Now that he had experienced the seal the heavens hex, he looked at Meng Hao and smiled. If you hadn't used this hex before, it would have been difficult to defend against. But now, I can use it too. He extended his right hand, splaying his fingers wide. Shockingly, light began to shine out, a light that looked very similar to the light cast by the seal the heavens hex. The only difference was that this light was black. The black light instantly stretched out toward Meng Hao, like a wave of fury that slammed into the white light of the seal the heavens hex. The instant they touched, a deafening boom spread out, shattering the starry sky, destroying planets. Even transcenders like Jin Yunqian would be completely destroyed by the force. Anyone who was not within the ancestor realm would be killed in body and soul by the shockwave created when the white and black lights made contact. There were no magics that could exceed this, not within this starry sky. In fact, even within the universe as a whole, it was something uncharacteristically rare. This battle had reached the ultimate pinnacle. BOOMMM. Blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth, and all heaven withered. Yet, even as the explosive energy continued to blast out in all directions, they continued to fuel their magic with all of the battle prowess they could muster. Meng Hao let out a mighty roar, and his hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture. The white light surrounding him twisted, shrinking down rapidly as it transformed into a single character. Seal. The seal character glittered radiantly. I shall seal the heavens. He threw his hands out above his head. Instantly, cracking sounds could be heard as though his arms might shatter at any moment. He was shaking visibly, clearing using all the power he could muster to unleash the seal character. In the blink of an eye, the character began to rumble toward all heaven, seemingly backed by the power of the universe itself. All heaven's eyes were filled with madness as he took a deep breath. The black light around him spun madly, shrinking down into his palm into a different seal character. A black seal character. Two huge sealing marks shot toward each other within the starry sky, and when they made contact, a boom echoed out that could shake all heaven and earth. Blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth. Eyes completely bloodshot, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture, causing the sword to appear, which slashed down viciously. A huge rift was torn open, which snaked through the starry sky toward all heaven. All heaven extended his right hand, and a black sword appeared behind him, which similarly slashed down. I am the true lord of this starry sky. I, all heaven, call upon the power of that starry sky and the laws of the universe. I sacrifice everything to kill Meng Hao and take all that belongs to him. The sword shone with resplendent light, growing larger and larger as it slashed out. When the two swords hit each other, the entire starry sky rumbled and even began to shatter. As it shattered, the universe beyond was revealed. Blood sprayed out of Meng Hao's mouth as the sword formed by the seal, the heavens' hex shattered and transformed into ash. However, the exact same thing happened to the sword created by all heaven. Meng Hao was shaken so hard that cracking sounds emanated out from inside of him, which were bones being broken. His flesh was shredded into a haze of blood, and he was sent tumbling backward like a kite with its string cut. His vision swam and the world spun. His cultivation base was thrown into utter chaos, and his will was shaken. However, all heaven was in similarly bad condition. He was trembling, his arms shattered, half of his body almost completely sealed to the point where it transformed into dust. With the exception of his left eye, the other parts of him which survived were almost completely withered away. Even his left eye, despite being complete, was now gray, and an aura of death emanated out from it. As for the pupil of that eye, it was growing larger. Clearly, once it overtook the rest of the eye, it would signify his complete death. However, despite the situation, a smile appeared on all heaven's withered face, and he began to laugh. Laughter rang out as he struggled to look over at Meng Hao, a strange expression on his face. Then, he started to breathe in deeply. Instantly, Meng Hao began to shake violently. His life force, his soul, everything about him began to seep out through the pores on his skin, through his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. It became a white smoke that swirled through the starry sky toward all heaven. The mistake you made was letting me see your seal the heavens hex. His voice was both weak and laced with madness. As the white smoke began to emanate out from Meng Hao and enter all heaven's excitement grew. Slowly but surely, the white smoke began to converge inside of him in the location of the missing 99th demon fruit. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSDH on Twitter. The winners for best comment will be announced along with the raffle winners sometime after the contest. Thanks for the great comments. I'm having a tough time picking my favorite. Chapter 1607, Are You Coming? Click here for soundtrack. Meng Hao's face was pale as his energy flowed out. However, his expression didn't change at all. Even as he began to wither up, he quietly said, "Oh, really?" Endless amounts of life force, soul power, and cultivation-based energy, everything that made up him, were all flowing into all heaven in the form of a white mist. It poured into all heaven's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, where it began to transform into a resplendent demon fruit. All of this takes some time to describe, but happened in the briefest of instants. Meng Hao became like a desiccated corpse, and a popping sound rang out as he transformed into dust, seemingly killed in body and soul. All heaven was trembling in excitement as his body began to reform, and the demon fruit in his chest shone with dazzling demonic light. Nirvanic rebirth, I live again, He threw his head back and roared as his innards shrank, then began to reform. Meng Hao, the 99th demon fruit, seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Even as all heaven's eyes were shining with excitement, his expression suddenly flickered. "Impossible," he said, focusing on the aura of nirvanic rebirth inside of him. That was the very aura that he desired, that he required, and yet he suddenly realized that the nirvanic aura was not his, but rather was coming from Meng Hao, the 99th demon fruit. All heaven's face fell as the demon fruit filled with cracks, causing boundless red light to seep out like threads. It was light abundant in demonic aura and boundless nirvanic rebirth. It spread out wildly through all heaven, reaching his limbs, his face, his whole body, and even his eye. As it filled him, it sealed everything about him. This was nirvanic rebirth, but it was the rebirth of the demon, the rebirth of Meng Hao. In that moment it became obvious that within the glowing red threads, the first demon sealing hex could be detected. Then the second hex and the third hex, all the way down to the 9th hex. All of them were there, completely sealing the body of all heaven, completely preventing him from doing anything. His foundation was being cut away. "Meng Hao," he shrieked. It was at this point that Meng Hao's voice spoke out inside of him. "Your mistake was being so sure that my ultimate hexing magic was the seal the heavens hex. Tens of thousands of years ago, I already came to the conclusion that after the 9th demon sealing hex, there is a 10th hex. This 10th hex exists in a realm that I cannot grasp. Only in the right circumstances could I unleash it, for example, when the 9th hex is available as the foundation, with the power of nirvanic rebirth to catalyze the hex. I needed to borrow your body to unleash it. 10th demon sealing hex. My fate is to seal the heavens like a demon." All heaven roared in fury, and yet had completely and utterly lost control of his own body. He could only watch as his right hand lifted up and performed an incantation gesture. A sensation of terror filled him as he felt power exploding out, a power similar to the seal the heavens hex, and yet different. It was infinitely domineering, something that commanded the ultimate level of respect within heaven and earth. Just as Meng Hao had said, "My fate is to seal the heavens like a demon." 1. For those of you who might have forgotten, this line is in the synopsis of the book. It's been there since day one. Demons are full of multifarious transformations. As of this moment, Meng Hao was using those multifarious transformations as the heart, and all heaven as the body, to unleash the ultimate divine ability. As his right hand lifted up, the starry sky outside the vast expanse began to shrink down, smaller and smaller, until it was a dimly shining globe hovering above his palm. There was no longer any such thing as the starry sky outside the vast expanse. Only the starry sky of the mountains and seas remained. Outside of that was the boundless universe, within which Meng Hao now hovered. All heaven's left eye was no longer struggling. It seemed lonely, fading away. It even appeared to be relieved somehow as it looked out into the depths of the universe. Meng Hao was now looking out of all heaven's left eye. All heaven's right hand slowly lifted up, and he could do nothing as it clenched into a fist and punched at that very eye. Boom! A tremor ran through him and his eye began to shrink. Despair could be seen, a bitter refusal to accept what was happening. Then it began to transform into ash. In the moment before he died, all heaven looked into the depths of the universe. No one could possibly know what he was looking at. Perhaps just the infinite darkness of the universe, or perhaps he was looking at where he came from. All heaven's body shivered as it transformed into ash. Cracking sounds emanated out, and he withered away until he was nothing. Countless streams of white mist poured out, transforming into the shape of Meng Hao. As he hovered there, mixed expressions could be seen on his face, and eventually he sighed. The truth was that in the past, it might have been very difficult to kill all heaven. But considering how much all heaven had been weakened, killing him wasn't really a very difficult thing for Meng Hao. In fact, were it not for the curse, Meng Hao would never have had such a difficult time, and would never have been forced into such deadly circumstances. The only difficult part had been fighting the three transcenders, which really had been dangerous. That was the only thing which had occurred that exceeded his powers of prediction. Everything else, every action he had taken, everything he had done, had been part of his plan. He made sure that all heaven had the wrong information, and always believed the seal the heavens hex to be the ultimate hexing magic. Using that hex would ensure that all heaven would actually appear in person, thinking that he had gained the upper hand. The truth was that Meng Hao had only used a fraction of the full power of the seal the heaven hex. If he had used its full power, he could have killed all heaven directly. However, killing all heaven wouldn't be enough to break the curse. Meng Hao had come to realize this tens of thousands of years ago. The answer actually lay within the jade slip he had been given by Shui Dongliu. It was because of that information that Meng Hao did everything he did, leading him to this point. "I now know how to break the curse," he said softly. "I just need time." With that, he closed his eyes for a very long moment before opening them again and looking far off into the distance. He almost felt as if he could see three individuals. One was Patriarch Vast Expanse, one was a young man in a black robe, and the other was the same person he had seen on the immortal god continent. It was almost as if they were traveling along somewhere far off in the distance, then suddenly stopped and looked back through the universe until their gazes fell on Meng Hao. They smiled warmly, as if they were all friends. He suddenly heard a voice in his mind. "We're waiting for you. Are you coming?" Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSDH on Twitter. The winners for best comment will be announced along with the raffle winners sometime after the contest. Thanks for the great comments. I'm having a tough time picking my favorite. Click here for soundtrack. Meng Hao had thought long and hard about whether it was true that the starry sky of the vast expanse had only ever had three transcenders. The answer to that question came to him when he saw Jin Yunshin. Perhaps the actual number of people who had transcended wasn't important. The key was that those three particular transcenders had destroyed fingers of all heaven, and were thus the perfect examples of what it meant to transcend. As Meng Hao looked at those three figures, he suddenly realized that there were other people like them, deeper within the universe. He knew by now that his true destination was that very universe. That was the world of the transcenders, a place where they could search for that which existed beyond the ancestor realm. The path of cultivation went on and on forever. It was like the Tao boundless. It was like the Dharma limitless. It was like magic never-ending. Meng Hao had learned that from All Heaven, and he could only imagine how incredibly powerful and terrifying All Heaven must have been back in his prime. It isn't time to leave yet, he thought, continuing to peer into the depths of the universe. After a long, long moment passed, he sighed. The truth was that his connection to the starry sky of the mountains and seas had already grown very weak. And yet, he couldn't simply sever that connection. He had to break the curse of All Heaven and return the soul seeds of everyone he knew back into the cycle of reincarnation. Smiling, he gave a farewell nod to the depths of the universe, and then turned and headed back into the starry sky of the mountains and seas. Soon, he was back in that unfamiliar home of his, in the mountain and sea realm on the 9th mountain. When he reached the ice mountain where all of the soul seeds were stored, he looked over at the two coffins. One of them contained Su Qing, who was in a deep sleep, and the other contained the butterfly, which almost seemed alive. He looked at them quietly, then sat down cross-legged. He seemed desolate, lonely, and yet filled with determination and focus. "I know the way," he murmured softly. "I just need time." With that, he closed his eyes and sank into meditation. The only way to break the curse of All Heaven was to become All Heaven. All Heaven was dead, but in that very moment before he ceased to exist, Meng Hao had merged with him. In that moment, he got what he needed, the seed of a memory. Perhaps it would be better to call it a discarnate will, something that he would slowly feed until it grew whole. Meng Hao's face was very calm as he sat there quietly, allowing time to pass. He was absolutely motionless, his will completely retracted from the starry sky. He completely ignored everything around him, paying it no heed. Time flowed by, 30,000 years. Within the starry sky of the mountains and seas, generations upon generations of cultivators came and went. War broke out over and over again between the mountain and sea realm and the vast expanse school. The old lizard returned to the dust. Next was the huge head and the termite. Eventually, even the enormous flower wilted and died. The parrot and meat jelly seemed to have unlimited longevity, and yet even they were showing signs of age. Eventually, they took to traveling out in the starry sky, leaving behind one legend after another in their own unique style. The Church of Lord Third appeared, and then the School of Lord Fifth. Things had been boring and dull for many years in the starry sky, but now new and amusing legends were spread. Another 30,000 years passed. The parrot returned, looking very tired and old. Meng Hao glanced over at it for a moment, then sealed it into an ice coffin he had prepared. The meat jelly drifted about in loneliness for a few thousand years before returning. It sat with Meng Hao, talking incessantly for a while before finally joining the parrot. When Meng Hao broke the curse, he would call them back. Guiding Trirane and Patriarch Reliance had held on all the way down to this point, but they were reaching their limit. With Meng Hao's help, they entered an even deeper state of sleep, which would help them endure for even longer. Meng Hao looked over at the ice coffin containing the parrot and meat jelly, and suddenly realized that his final connections to the world were almost gone. He was now completely and utterly alone. There he sat on the ninth mountain, meditating alone. 100,000 years went by. Drastic changes occurred in the starry sky. Jin Yunshan's appointed time of confinement passed, and he emerged. Once again, he led the vast expanse school to sweep across the starry sky, although he didn't dare to even get near the mountain and sea realm. Despite that, he became a figure of respect and veneration among all cultivators. Time passed. After another 100,000 years, Jin Yunshan was getting bored. He still hadn't reached full transcendence and thus was still subject to the effects of the curse. Eventually, he decided to do as Meng Hao had suggested, to leave this starry sky and travel out into the universe. Before departing, he went to the mountain and sea realm, where he stood outside the ninth mountain and looked up toward the peak. Eventually, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. He was the last person within the starry sky who could be considered an old friend of Meng Hao. His departure indicated that not a single person within the starry sky remembered who Meng Hao was. Or perhaps it was he that had come to forget the starry sky of the mountains and seas. No one could say for sure what the truth was. 100,000 years, 200,000 years, 300,000 years, 400,000 years. Eventually, 1,000,000 years passed. Powers rose and fell within the starry sky of the mountains and seas. Powerful experts were born and died. There was even someone who reached the same level as Jin Yunshan. It was a woman, someone with spectacular latent talent. Unfortunately, she was never able to transcend in soul. She led an army against the vast expanse school, which had stood as the peak sect for 1,000,000 years. It fell, becoming a thing of the past. Now, the only thing which had existed since ancient times was the mountain and sea realm. It almost seemed foreordained that nothing connected to Meng Hao would be able to last for all eternity. Not even the mountain and sea realm. After another 1,000,000 years passed, another powerful transcender appeared, who attacked the mountain and sea realm. There was a huge war which the mountain and sea realm managed to win, and yet at great cost. The casualties were enormous. Years went by. The mountain and sea realm came to be something of a symbol. Every 1,000,000 years, someone would step halfway into transcendence and would try to take it. Sometimes more than one person would make that step. On one occasion, there were 3. All of them set their sights on the mountain and sea realm. All of them were completely convinced that it was only by means of the mountain and sea realm that they could elevate their souls and reach full transcendence. However, none of the successive attacking transcenders ever managed to destroy it. That happened after 50,000,000 years passed, and the mountain and sea realm rotted from the inside as it descended into civil war. Schisms arose among the cultivators there, and eventually many of them left to wander the starry sky. Gradually, the mountain and sea realm fell into ruin. In the end, it hovered there alone in the starry sky, broken, fading away into time. The first mountain and sea vanished, then the second. Eventually, the only thing that remained was the ninth mountain and ninth sea. By the time that happened, Meng Hao had been secluded in meditation for 100,000,000 years. That year, something catastrophic occurred within the starry sky. It was something completely and utterly mysterious in nature, a wind of destruction that blew across everything, taking all life with it. It was the end of an epoch. Check here for the contest rules. Use the hashtag ISSDH on Twitter. The winners for best comment will be announced along with the raffle winners sometime after the contest. Thanks for the great comments. You're really forcing me to make some tough decisions. Chapter 1609, Becoming All Heaven. Click here for soundtrack. It was a black wind that not only destroyed life but gave it. After it blew past, the starry sky was completely silent. But then, planets emerged, worlds were born, and new forms of life appeared. Things started out very primitively, but soon reached the point where the practice of cultivation began. The relics and remnants of the past epoch were what the hosts of new living beings used as the basis for their growth. Around this time, Meng Hao opened his eyes from his meditation. His gaze was somewhat blank as he realized that he couldn't remember exactly who he was. He seemed to have forgotten everything from the past. It was simply too far away, making it impossible to recall. The only reason he had even come to awaken was that he realized that his body was beginning to waste away. Although the progress was extremely slow, the signs of it were there. Time passed within the new epoch. One generation after another came and went. Powerful experts arose, becoming dazzling flowers floating along down the stream of time. They created a spectacular and magnificent era, and at its height, there were actually 7 cultivators who stepped halfway into transcendence. But then things began to decline. Another 100 million years had passed. The black wind once again appeared, and everything began again. One epoch ended, and another began. Meng Hao opened his eyes again, and found that the decay of his body had become more pronounced. During the following epoch, the 9th mountain and sea was discovered. It became a place that countless cultivators looked toward with hope, believing it to be a holy land for cultivation. During this epoch, everything centered around the struggles and fighting to control the 9th mountain and sea. That epoch ended, and another began. It was like a cycle, an endless cycle. Reincarnation flowed constantly. Soon the 4th epoch passed, and the 5th, then the 6th epoch. Eventually 10 epochs passed, then 20, then 30. Meng Hao eventually lost track of how many epochs had actually gone by. He forgot about the flow of time and only knew that a very, very long time had passed. As that time passed, his body showed more and more signs of decay. That decay filled him until eventually some parts of his body began to fade away. It started with his feet, slowly moving up his legs until his torso began to vanish. By that point, it was hard to say exactly how many epochs had passed for the living beings in the starry sky of the mountains and seas. It was a cycle that seemed as if it would go on and on with no end. It was nothing cruel. That was simply the natural law of the universe and a part of the cycle of reincarnation. Eventually, Meng Hao's body had almost completely faded away. Only 5 fingers and an eye remained. At that time, Meng Hao suddenly felt fear. It was a sensation of terror which he hadn't experienced for a very, very long time. But there it was. He instinctively wanted to prevent himself from fading away completely. Perhaps it was because of how his body was fading away, and because of the power of his own essence seeping out into the starry sky, that in one particular epoch, a certain person appeared. He was a powerful expert who surpassed all of the other powerful experts from the previous epochs. He eventually absorbed some of Meng Hao's essence and became a full transcender. In the moment that he transcended, Meng Hao, in his confusion, attempted to consume him. Unfortunately, he was too weak, so weak that he couldn't even fully awaken. Before he could prepare himself fully, that transcender destroyed one of his fingers and left to travel the universe. Meng Hao felt pain and began to tremble, a trembling that affected even the starry sky. Despite the fact that he wanted to, Meng Hao couldn't awaken. He needed more time. Another epoch went by, and another person appeared who absorbed some of his essence and destroyed a second of his fingers. The pain nearly drove Meng Hao mad, and he was left howling in rage. Eventually, a third transcender appeared who destroyed a third finger. At long last, Meng Hao awoke. The third transcender was able to flee, but the important thing was that Meng Hao was now awake. He began to plan a way to live once again. He needed nirvanic rebirth. After coming to this conclusion, he began a scheme. Unfortunately, he was too weak, so he sent his blood out in an attempt to gather enough power to perform nirvanic rebirth. Eventually, someone came along who was perfect for his plan. He absorbed that person, who became the first nirvana fruit inside of him. He could tell that he would need 99 such nirvana fruits to become complete and have his nirvanic rebirth. Time passed, and he eventually got his second, third, and fourth nirvana fruits. He was very patient and continued to wait for the blood he had scattered to be gathered back in. After collecting his 98th nirvana fruit, the very last person he had been waiting for finally appeared. A heaven-shaking, earth-shattering battle resulted. The people who had severed his 3 fingers even managed to interfere surreptitiously. But in the end, they all failed. He successfully transformed that final individual into his 99th nirvana fruit, and the power of nirvanic rebirth was unleashed. Rumbling filled his mind, causing him to shake as he opened his eyes. When his voice spoke, it filled the entire starry sky. "I am all heaven," said the muffled voice. But then, sharp pain stabbed through his mind as he recalled a memory which had been buried deep, deep within. It was something he had almost completely forgotten. He was all heaven, and yet he was not complete. He turned his head to look out in the universe. There, somewhere deep within the universe, he could sense an indescribably powerful aura that left him trembling. That aura contained incredible amounts of immeasurably dense immortal chi, so much so that it was terrifying. It was the aura of the immortal. The difference between himself and that aura was like the difference between a firefly and the sun. It was an aura that seemed capable of fighting against the universe as a whole, something so powerful it defied explanation. Somehow he could sense that he was connected to that entity in some ways. It was at this point that he remembered where he came from. He came from the depths of the universe. A war had been fought, and he was actually a clone of that incredibly powerful individual, a clone who had been severed away. He was a clone who had been exiled to this location, where he had instinctively consumed a starry sky, becoming its lord. Deep within his mind, he could tell that all heaven possessed intense and incredible fear of that original entity. Are you Billy? All of those memories flooded up, and he knew beyond the shadow of a doubt the general location of all heaven's true self. That person was in the center of the universe, a place that was flourishing and radiant. In comparison, his current location was remote, barren, like a distant corner. Okay, from here on out, no more comments from me. Only a few chapters to go. What will happen next? Chapter 1610, Whose Clone? Click here for soundtrack. Meng Hao's mind was shaken, and he was also shaken visibly. At some indeterminable point in the past, a sealing mark had appeared in his brain, which now flickered with the will of heaven sealing. Radiant light spread out, and Meng Hao instinctively extended his right hand and waved his finger. I hereby break my curse. The words coming out of his mouth seemed strange, but for some reason he felt as if they needed to be said. Instantly, rumbling like that of thunder filled the starry sky. It was especially intense in the region where Meng Hao sat. A huge rift appeared on the ice mountain where all of the soul seeds were stored. Instantly, the soul seeds, which had long since grown dim and dark, seemed to pulse like beating hearts. All of a sudden, they brimmed with life force. It was as if the gateway leading into reincarnation, which had once been shut tight, was now blown wide open for them. As the countless soul seeds were restored, Meng Hao's mind experienced something like two huge hands ripping it apart. The pain was so intense that he screamed, and his eyes went completely bloodshot. He was shaking as countless memories suddenly flooded up inside of him. He remembered the mountain and sea realm, his parents, Su Qing, Chu Yuyan, Fatty, Wang Yaoke, Patriarch Reliance, guiding Trirane, and everything else. He remembered his battle with all heaven, and he remembered going into meditation. He remembered Shui Dongliu, who, in the moments before dying, had handed Meng Hao a jade slip with a plan detailed inside. Rumbling sounds filled Meng Hao's mind, and blood oozed out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. He slowly looked up and spoke out in a voice that was hoarse, and yet filled with determination. I am not all heaven, I am Meng Hao. I am Menghao. With that, he threw his head back and roared. His roar filled the starry sky, shaking it, causing the ninth mountain and sea to tremble. He began to pant as he recalled the truth about everything. He remembered the brief moment in which he had possessed all heaven during their final battle. He remembered making contact with all heaven's thoughts, and he remembered that discarnate will, which he had placed in his own mind like a seed. Gradually, that discarnate will from all heaven grew, making something like a duplicate of all heaven that Meng Hao intentionally allowed to possess him. That had been Shui Dongliu's plan. It was an insane plan, and the slightest misstep could have led to Meng Hao losing himself forever to fully transforming into all heaven. But that was the only way to break the curse. That curse could only be broken by all heaven. Not even killing him could accomplish it. All heaven had to do it of his own accord. Therefore, the only way to break the curse had been to become all heaven. And that was why everything played out the way it did. Trembling, Meng Hao looked over at the broken ice mountain. He saw the awakening soul seeds and then started to laugh, a clear, crisp laugh that spread out in all directions. He knew that he had finally succeeded. I did it. I finally did it. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and he struggled to stand up. With every breath he took, the starry sky trembled and his body recovered itself. His divine sense, his soul, his will, and his cultivation base were all recovering from their state of being withered. Eventually, he managed to recover his composure. At that point, he looked out into the depths of the universe and remembered how all heaven had done the same thing in the last moment before dying. Then he recalled what he had experienced after becoming all heaven. After recalling that memory, his heart began to pound. Although he could remember clearly what had occurred, he had a hard time believing it was true. Back when all heaven had been whole, he had had a profound impact on the entire starry sky. It was only by gaining enlightenment of his essence that the ghost, the devil, the god, and the demon appeared. Those powerful transcenders all came to be because of all heaven, and all heaven was only a clone of some other entity. That entity existed somewhere else in the universe and had existed for countless years. The clone's connection with its true form had been severed, and he had become all heaven. Mixed emotions could be seen in Meng Hao's eyes as he looked out at the universe. He knew that somewhere out there, all heaven's true form existed as an entity of unimaginable power. Furthermore, who was it that had managed to sever a clone from someone that powerful? It was in that moment that Meng Hao finally came to understand the meaning of that ancient saying. All heaven fears the immortal. He feared the immortal because he feared his true self. Perhaps all heaven's true self was the real immortal. Therefore, it was actually impossible for Meng Hao or any of the others to truly become the immortal. Even if all heaven did nothing to stop them from doing so, they still would have failed to become the immortal. It was a secret unknown to the god, the devil, or even the ghost. Perhaps they had come to have certain speculations, which was why they were traveling out in the universe. Meng Hao was the only person to have glimpsed the truth. The universe. After some thought, a look of unprecedented anticipation appeared within his eyes. He didn't fear the truth. In contrast, it filled him with incredible hope. He looked forward with keen anticipation to traveling out into the universe, to reaching its center. Perhaps one day, he would have the chance to fight that so-called immortal. Now that I think about it, I bet the other three transcenders would want to do the same thing. With that, he waved his sleeve, wiping away all of the vestiges of all heaven and suppressing his desire to go out into the universe. Now was not the time. He took a deep breath and looked over at the ice coffin where Su Qing lay, his eyes filled with love. He walked over and looked at her beautiful face, then slowly leaned down. As he did, the ice melted, causing mist to roll out. Then his lips touched her forehead as he kissed her gently. It was impossible to count how many years had passed since he last kissed her. It was a kiss which carried profound longing, a kiss which contained a focus that had lasted for epochs upon epochs. "Kinger, my wife," he said softly. "You've been sleeping for so long, it's time to wake up." Her eyelashes fluttered and she slowly opened her eyes. A blank expression could be seen at first, but her gaze quickly focused. She looked at Meng Hao and then smiled. Her eyes were like deep pools of placid water. Smiling, Meng Hao lifted her out of the ice coffin and helped her to her feet. Then he turned to look at the ice coffins containing his parents and the parrot and meat jelly. It was only in that moment that he realized that the coffin containing the parrot and meat jelly had already melted, and they were standing there, looking at him with shocked expressions on their faces. Suddenly, miserable shrieks rang out. Scared out of their minds, the parrot and meat jelly embraced each other and began to cry out at the tops of their lungs. "Don't try to kiss me. Damn it, that's disgusting. Stop right there. Lord Fifth doesn't even like you. You have no fur. Don't even think about touching me." "Back the hell away from me, Meng Hao. Lord Third's chastity won't be sullied by you, you bully. You can't do that, that's wrong. That's immoral." Meng Hao laughed. He was happier now than he had been in ages. Chapter 1611, Untitled. Click here for soundtrack. Su Qing stood there next to Meng Hao, looking at the parrot and meat jelly, and she started laughing. It was a laughter so warm and beautiful it could melt ice. Meng Hao took a deep breath as he looked over at the coffin containing the mountain and sea butterfly and his parents. As the coffin melted, the butterfly transformed into countless motes of colorful light, light that was bursting with life force. Gradually, the light formed together into a man and a woman, who stood there embracing each other. At the same time, rumbling sounds could be heard as an enormous open door descended. It was the door leading to the cycle of reincarnation, which would ensure that the souls who were part of it never died. The ice mountain was melting, and as it did, the awakening soul seeds inside became countless figures who floated up toward the door. They had been waiting to be reincarnated for a very, very long time. From a distance, the soul seeds became like a river that swept into the door of reincarnation, Meng Hao's parents included. Within that river of souls, he saw Fatty, Wang Yaokai, Li Linger, Jixiang Tiangzai, Fang Yu, Sun Hai, his master pill demon, Perfect, as well as many other faces. They were all people who existed within his memories. They included Paragon C Dream, K Siddhagarbha, Shui Dongliu, Grandpa Meng, and Grandpa Fang. Meng Hao stood there watching, his heart filled with warmth, clasping Su Qing's hand tightly. After all of the soul seeds disappeared into the cycle of reincarnation, Meng Hao could sense them being born again, and he smiled. It was also in this same moment that water once again began to bubble within the ninth sea, as guiding trireme began to recover. Top the ninth mountain, Patriarch Reliance, who by this point had been reduced to nothing more than a turtle shell, suddenly began to emanate signs of life. Eventually, a head emerged from inside the shell. He took a deep breath, then looked up and roared, "The Patriarch is back." On his back was the state of Zhao, which also began to show signs of life. Rumbling echoed out in all directions. Beauty was blooming everywhere. Backslash. Decades upon decades passed in a flash. It was a new, unknown epoch in the starry sky of the mountains and seas. Although the mountain and sea realm itself didn't exist anymore, powerful organizations of cultivators were already sweeping through the starry sky. It was hard to say which of them was more powerful, but it didn't really matter. On all the planets and worlds, mortals and cultivators alike were rising to new heights. Some people said that this was an era which was destined to rise to the very pinnacle of glory. More powerful experts would appear in this time than ever had before, the reason being that in the recent decades, all of the powerful organizations had given rise to cultivators with shocking latent talent. There were even some legendary chosen who appeared that only came along once in 10,000 years. Because of such chosen, the world of cultivation in the starry sky was reaching a dazzling pinnacle. No one knew exactly why this was happening. As for that group of chosen, it was almost as if they had all agreed to be born at exactly the same time. Although they all came from different places and didn't know each other, as soon as they met the other chosen, they felt an instant connection. Because of that, they didn't devolve into fighting but instead worked together to seek out their destiny. Now that the curse was broken, many of those who had been cultivators of the mountain and sea realm chose to once again walk the path of cultivation. However, not everyone did. There were many who chose to become mortals to live peaceful and ordinary lives. And yet, regardless of the decisions they made, they seemed to benefit from the blessing of the starry sky. That was of course the blessing of Meng Hao, which ensured that no matter how long they lived or how many lives they experienced, their souls would never be destroyed. Even when the epoch ended and everything faded away, their souls would continue on. In some ways, they had become eternal. Given enough time, they would eventually transcend, and then they would be able to remember everything from their previous lives. A golden age was starting in the starry sky. One day, on one particular planet, a young man stood proudly in front of a young woman, holding a spear in his hand. He had a freckled face and was quite fat, like a ball of flesh. The young woman was slender and beautiful, but her brow was furrowed as she glared at the young man. "Are you going to agree or not?" asked the young man. "If you don't agree to become Grandpa Fatty's Taoist partner, well then." With a mighty roar, he placed the spearhead into his mouth and bit down, whereupon a cracking sound emanated out as the spearhead shattered. Then he proudly continued, "Don't you know, Grandpa Fatty has some of the best latent talent in the entire starry sky, and I understood why because of a dream I had. I'm actually the brother of the will of this starry sky. Be with me, and both of us can become immortal together." He was trying to sound elegant and refined, but the chunks of the spearhead in his mouth hurt quite a bit, and he was even starting to tremble involuntarily. Inwardly, he grumbled to himself that this habit that he picked up in the dream was entirely unbearable. The young woman's jaw dropped, and she stared at the young man with wide eyes. She was a disciple of the Godbloom sect, and this was her first time leaving the sect on training. She had never imagined that she would run into a fat kid like this. Even more unbelievable was that he had been following her around for months, pestering her. "You're crazy," she said. The way that he was trembling actually frightened her a bit, so she snorted coldly, turned, and walked off. "Hey, wait for me," the fat young man cried, and immediately hurried after her, pasting an ingratiating smile onto his face. After they left, the sound of chuckling could be heard from the spot they had just been standing in, as Meng Hao and Su Qing materialized. Su Qing was covering her mouth with her hand, and a wide smile could be seen on Meng Hao's face. Naturally, that fat young man was none other than the reincarnated fatty, Li Fugui. The parrot and meat jelly were perched on Meng Hao's shoulders, disdainful looks on their faces. Shameless, completely shameless. So that was how he got all those Taoist partners back in the day. Meng Hao shook his head and looked off into the distance. "Come on, let's go check in on everyone else," he said softly. "After that, we can leave this place." He seemed reluctant to part with all of his friends, but the determination in his eyes was clear. Chapter 16:12, Missing Clues. Click here for soundtrack. Meng Hao and Su Qing traveled among the powerful organizations in the starry sky of the mountains and seas, checking in on all the familiar faces who were rising to glory after having been reincarnated. Xianxia had become a princess in one of the mortal kingdoms. Li Linger had joined a powerful sect and become their only legacy disciple. Wang Yaokai was a rogue cultivator with an intense, murderous aura who had fought and killed his way to fame. Dong Hu was his younger brother, and the two of them were the most famous of all the rogue cultivators. Yang Zai and so many other familiar faces all had their own stories to tell. Paragon C. Dream had been a powerful cultivator in her previous life, but this time she chose the mortal world. She got married and had children and was very happy. Then there was K. Siddhigarbha. He also chose the mortal world, becoming an upright and plain-spoken local magistrate who brought justice to the common people. Pill Demon was innately skilled in the Tao of alchemy, and that didn't change because of reincarnation. He joined the largest alchemy sect in the Starry Sky, where he became the most illustrious of chosen. Fan Donger became the leader of a group of rebels in one of the mortal worlds. She led the people in revolt, overthrowing the tyrannical government. Although she was merely a mortal, she shone with a brilliance that inspired trust in anyone who laid eyes on her. Fang Yu and Sun Hai were eternally connected as husband and wife, a connection that remained even in the cycle of reincarnation. Although they started out in sects very far away from each other, as fate would have it, they ended up meeting. Meng Hao arranged for Qi Yunhai and Qi Jiusi to once again become father and son. Qi Yunhai was the same loving father, and Qi Jiusi was a filial son. Meng Hao traveled through the starry sky of the mountains and seas to see everyone he remembered from the past. Some of them lived in the mortal world, others chose cultivation. Regardless of their choices, they all received blessings from Meng Hao. They were doted upon by the starry sky itself and were all happy. Sounds of laughter and joy could be heard everywhere. All of the soul seeds which had entered the cycle of reincarnation found happiness. In turn, that happiness brought a smile to Meng Hao's face. It was a happiness that stayed with him constantly now that the curse had been broken. He eventually found Chu Yuyan's daughter perfect. After reincarnation, she once again chose the path of cultivation. She became the heavenly chosen daughter of the most powerful organization within the starry sky. Meng Hao graced her with a fatherly love, and as such, she truly could be considered chosen by the heavens. After all, her father was the will of the starry sky. The mastiff grew up with Perfect, her loyal, lifelong companion. When Meng Hao saw the smile of happiness on Perfect's face, his eyes shone with the warmth of love. He reached out and waved his hand, leaving a sealing mark on her soul. It was a mark that would forever connect the two of them as father and daughter. After Meng Hao left, it wouldn't matter how far away he went, that connection would always remain. The depths of the universe might be a bustling, thriving place, but it would also contain untold dangers. Meng Hao was confident enough to take Su Qing with him there, but he also hoped that the friends and relatives he left behind in his starry sky would be protected. This was his home, and these people were his family. "They're happy," Su Qing said softly, clasping his hand. He nodded, and the two of them made their way off into the distance. Backslash. On one particular land mass within the starry sky, the weather was very strange. According to the legends many epochs in the past, this place had been a huge flower divided into two worlds, one of ice, the other of fire. Eventually, a heaven and earth came to exist here, and yet there were only 2 seasons. Half the year would be filled with snow and ice, and the other half would be scorchingly hot. That sort of environment affected the personalities of the people who were born there, and most of them cultivated magic that had to do with ice and fire. In the very center of that world was a mountain, half of which was freezing ice, the other half of which was covered with burning flames. However, the peak of the mountain was always as cool as spring. A young man sat cross-legged on the mountain, smiling, a profound gleam in his eyes as he looked off into the distance. His name was Shui Dongliu. He had not been born with that name, he had given it to himself. He had simply told people that it was his true name, Shui Dongliu. He was a disciple of a small sect, and instead of practicing cultivation, he preferred to sit on this mountain and look off into the distance, as if he were waiting for something. People had asked him what he was waiting for, and his answer was always the same. "I'm waiting for an old friend. He'll be leaving soon, but he'll come to say farewell before he does." The days passed, icy coldness swirling on one side of him, burning flames on the other. One day, a bright light flickered in his eyes, and he turned and smiled. "It's been a long, long time," he said. As the words left his mouth, Meng Hao and Su Qing materialized in front of him. Smiling, Meng Hao clasped hands and bowed deeply. That bow was one of thanks, thanks to Shui Dongliu for discerning how to break the curse. It was also a bow of deep respect. Shui Dongliu started laughing, a loud, clear laughter filled with happiness. Meeting with old friends is always one of the greatest happinesses in life, he said. I've already looked into your fortune and I can tell you that your trip into the universe will lead to magnificent glory. As for this place, don't worry, I'll remain behind to watch over it. Many thanks, Senior, Meng Hao said. It was no surprise to him that Shui Dongliu had somehow recovered his memories. Shui Dongliu was a legendary figure. Whether it was his identity as Nine Seals, or that part of his soul which came from even further back in time, when it came to the mountain and sea realm, and to this starry sky, he was as attached to it as Meng Hao was. Su Qing gave a curtsying bow to Shui Dongliu, for whom she also felt deep respect and veneration. Shui Dongliu smiled and shook his head. He looked deeply at Meng Hao, then Su Qing, and finally at the parrot. Although he bore the semblance of a young man when he spoke, his voice seemed completely ancient, filled with the power of time. That parrot comes from the same place as all heaven. It has forgotten the past, sealed it away, take it with you into the universe. You have already reached the highest peak, and yet long ago someone told me that the Tao is boundless. Shui Dongliu once again shook his head and smiled. Rising to his feet, he turned and walked away into the heavens, into the void far, far away. A tremor ran through the parrot, and a blank look could be seen in its eyes, as if it had just recalled something vague and difficult to fully grasp. After a moment, though, it heard Meng Hao speaking. Don't think about it now, he said. Later, I can help you search for those missing clues. Chapter 16:13, A New Life for Father and Mother. Click here for soundtrack. In one part of the starry sky of the mountains and seas was a planet that, if you examined it carefully, closely resembled the old planet South Heaven from the mountain and sea realm. When Meng Hao and Su Qing materialized on the planet, a slight tremor ran through Meng Hao. Considering the high level of his cultivation base, there were few things in the world that could shake him mentally. This planet was different, though. This place was too important. It was on this planet that his father and mother had been reincarnated. They had been transformed into the mountain and sea butterfly, and had borne the weight of all of the cultivators of the mountain and sea realm. They had slept for countless epochs, and then entered the cycle of reincarnation after the curse was broken. Their love for Meng Hao could not be topped. It was the type of love that was completely selfless. On one particular continent on that planet, there was a city through which a wide river flowed. Many people lived in the city, and because it was also located on a major highway in the country, it was a place where business flourished. The city was a hubbub of voices, especially in one particular location in the southeast of the city, where a 7-story pagoda rose up above the rest of the buildings. The public square in front of the pagoda was packed with people, all of whom were boiling in excitement. Cheering and joyous laughter rose up into the air. Young people were hurrying toward the square from all corners of the city, filled with anticipation and excitement. Did you hear? Grand philanthropist Meng is marrying off one of his daughters today. I heard that she's a real beauty. Even the prince wanted to marry her, but the leader of the Meng clan, Meng Bancheng, refused his offer. Grand philanthropist Meng is almost as rich as the entire empire itself. He can even go into the Forbidden Palace anytime he wants. The only reason he still lives in this place is because he can't bear to part with his ancestral home. Come on, hurry up. Their plan for the betrothment ceremony sounds a bit silly, but it's no joke. It's all up to fate, not family background. Whoever catches the silk ball will become a son-in-law of the Ming clan. Everyone was in a complete uproar. In fact, outside of the 7-story pagoda, there were plenty of princes, dukes, and famous scholars from the mortal kingdom, all of whom had staked out their spots and were waiting with nervous anticipation, staring up at the top of the pagoda. The atmosphere had reached a fever pitch. On top of the 7-story pagoda was a young woman with a gauze veil covering her face, making it impossible to see her facial features clearly. However, even from a distance, it was possible to tell that she was spectacularly beautiful. She had eyes like deep pools of water, but as she looked down at the crowd below, her gaze gradually went blank. She wasn't sure why she felt the way she did, but she was sure that somewhere down below, someone very important was waiting for her. For some reason, she felt like it was her husband from a previous life. In that previous life, the two of them had been a butterfly, and after flying into the cycle of reincarnation, they had been waiting for each other. It was at this point that a voice drifted out from inside the pagoda. It was none other than Meng Bencheng. My daughter's groom will not be selected by family background or status, but by fate. The silk ball will be thrown out, and whoever catches it will become her husband. Meng Bancheng's voice was laced with age, and his words seemed to be spoken a bit begrudgingly. This betrothment method did seem a bit silly to him, and he had refused the idea. However, his daughter had stubbornly insisted. As soon as his words echoed out through the air, a wave of excitement rippled through the audience down below. Not too far away from the crowd, a scholar was passing by who happened to be berating his apprentice for laziness. Their original plan had been to leave the city, but because of the apprentice, they missed the departing horse cart and were now forced to find lodging for the night. At first, the scholar didn't even notice the commotion of the betrothment, but then a sudden gust of wind blew past him, and his eyes glazed over slightly. He looked up, and the first thing he saw was the young woman on the pagoda, wreathed in sunlight, staring down at him. Their gazes met. It was a gaze that could endure anything. That seemed to spring from a past life. That could stir the soul. That seemed to come from a past incarnation. The scholar saw a vague image of something like a tall tower. He was standing there, and that young woman was next to him. He saw a vague image of himself, and the young woman becoming a butterfly that fluttered through the starry sky. He saw a vague image of the two of them growing old, smiling together, always there for each other, no matter how many lives passed. He saw a vague image of the two of them embracing each other as they entered the cycle of reincarnation. All of the hubbub and excitement faded into calm silence, as though the scholar was suddenly not a part of the world anymore. Nothing else existed except for that young woman, whose face seemed to be imprinted deep in his heart. The scholar shivered. He wasn't the only one. The young woman on top of the pagoda trembled the instant her gaze met the scholar's. Then her eyes began to shine with unprecedented brightness. There was a voice inside of her telling her that the reason she had demanded this type of betrothment, the reason for all the choices she had ever made in her life, was because she was waiting for someone, and that person was this scholar. She smiled and threw out the silk ball with all the strength she could muster. The beautiful, multicolored silk ball became a crescent streak of light that soared through the air. Meng Hao and Su Qing were standing there in the crowd, observing. A smile could be seen on Meng Hao's face, and his heart was calm. The young woman, of course, was his mother, and the scholar was his father. The scene playing out in front of him filled his heart with gladness. But then, even as the silk ball began to descend, he noticed a cultivator in the crowd who wore a cold smile on his face as he manipulated the ball to head in his direction. Of course, that cultivator had no way of knowing who he was actually offending. Meng Hao's expression turned grim. For a cultivator to do something like this was far worse than wanton killing and slaughtering as far as Meng Hao was concerned. He waved his finger, and the silk ball continued to fly toward the scholar. A moment later, it landed in his arms. The scholar stared in shock, grabbing onto the ball and then looking back up at the woman on the pagoda. A shy smile could be seen on her face as she ducked her head down and hurried back into the pagoda. At the same time, servants poured out from the Ming clan and clustered around the young scholar, bowing respectfully. Under the annoyed and jealous glares of the crowd, the scholar was hurried into the pagoda. He would soon be a son-in-law of the Ming clan, husband to one of the clan's daughters. Meng Hao's expression softened even more. A few days later, the scholar and the young woman were married. The wedding feast was a grand celebration that filled the entire city with joy. Meng Hao and Su Qing both attended. It was a strange feeling to attend the wedding celebration of one's own parents, but it was a happy thing. He and Su Qing even prepared a gift, which was a wall scroll. It read, "Eternal happiness through all lives." Chapter 16:14. A ship approaches from the horizon. Click here for soundtrack. A few days later, Meng Hao and Su Qing left, having left his parents with his eternal blessings. As for the cultivator who had tried to interfere with the silk ball, it goes without saying that he met a bad end. He had offended Meng Hao, the lord of the starry sky, and had done so in a way that was no better than slaughtering a sect or even wiping out a world. To Meng Hao, it was actually worse than any of those things. The cultivator vanished without a trace. He was completely wiped out, along with the memories of him which existed in the minds of people who had known him. It was as if he had never even existed within the starry sky to begin with. Considering Meng Hao's status and position, he normally wouldn't do such a thing. However, that insignificant cultivator had encroached upon the most precious place in Meng Hao's heart. The cultivator was destroyed in body and soul. never even aware of the monumental disaster he had brought upon himself. There was one last thing Meng Hao did before leaving. He took Su Qing down the river to a fishing village. There they caught sight of a fisherman, a burly fellow who was in the middle of tossing out a fishing net. The river was teeming with fish, so the man was shocked when he pulled the net in to find only a gourd inside. He looked curiously at the gourd, wondering why it would be lying at the bottom of the river. It seemed almost like it was brand new, but the top was stoppered up, turning it into a storage container. The fisherman stood there, curiously examining the gourd, and was just about to open it when he noticed Meng Hao and Su Qing. "You're Mr. Zhou from the Zhou clan, right?" Meng Hao asked, eyes glittering as though he was very happy to be talking to this man. He smiled. "Would you mind selling me that bottle gourd?" The burly man stared back in shock for a moment, apparently surprised that this person even knew his surname. He looked at the bottle gourd and grinned. "It's just a bottle gourd. It's hardly worth anything. If you want it, big bro, you can have it." With that, he handed the bottle gourd over to Meng Hao. Meng Hao took it but shook his head and his eyes sparkled. Su Qing stood off to the side, watching in surprise. It almost seemed as if this burly fisherman were an old friend of Meng Hao's. However, she always felt a sense of familiarity toward Meng Hao's old friends, and this man seemed like a complete stranger. "I insist on buying it," Meng Hao said. "How about this? I'll give you 10 pieces of silver for it." "Okay." With that he extended his hand, within which were 10 pieces of silver. The burly fisherman's eyes went wide. Apparently, he thought this young man was a complete imbecile. He took a deep breath and then accepted the silver, looking a bit embarrassed. Then he scratched his head and said, This. Don't mention it, Mr. Zhou." With that, Meng Hao took out 3 more pieces of silver and put them into the fisherman's hand. "Here are 3 more silver pieces. Take them. All of this is to pay for a debt I owed to the Zhou clan years ago." This time, the fisherman's jaw dropped. Meng Hao wasn't finished. "Here are some medicinal pills. Boil them in water and drink the resulting elixir. It will bring blessings to the Zhou clan for all generations to come in this starry sky. I wish you health and good fortune, sir. This is the interest for a debt of 3 silvers incurred countless epochs ago." After Meng Hao gave the silver and the medicinal pills to the burly fisherman, it seemed as if a great weight had been lifted off of his shoulders. Apparently, even his cultivation base had inched closer toward a breakthrough. It was as if a karma thread stretching back countless ages into the past had finally been satisfied. Meng Hao laughed heartily, then clasped the bottle gourd in one hand and Su Qing's hand in the other as he took a step forward. That step took him out into the heavens, into the vast starry sky. Out there among the stars, Su Qing looked quizzically at Meng Hao and asked, "Who was he?" "Back when you pulled me into the world of cultivation, I was a scholar," he said, chuckling. "I owed Steward Zhou from Yunji County 3 pieces of silver. After all the epochs which have passed, I've finally managed to pay back the debt, principal and interest." Su Qing's eyes went wide with disbelief for a moment, then she started laughing. Eventually her eyes came to rest on the bottle gourd. "I threw this same bottle gourd off Mount Dacheng all those years ago. I guess we've come in a big circle. Now that I have it back, I might as well write down a new ambition and toss it out into the universe." Meng Hao's eyes shone brightly with anticipation as he gazed out into the far reaches. His expression was actually a bit bashful, and when Su Qing noticed that, she couldn't hold back from laughing out loud. She could only imagine the scene of Meng Hao traveling the depths of the universe, bashfully handing out promissory notes. There was now nothing holding him back. He had resolved all pertinent matters, and now his old personality was finally showing through. "It's about time to go," he said. "Somewhere out in the universe are the ghost, the god, and the devil. They've been waiting out there for ages now. I wonder if I can get any of them to write me a promissory note." Heart bursting with ambition, face filled with pious ardor, he took another step forward. Su Qing was laughing so hard her sides hurt, and the parrot was squawking up a storm to the babbling meat jelly. They vanished, and when they reappeared, they were no longer in the starry sky of the mountains and seas. They were out in the boundless universe. In the majestic universe, there were unending possibilities. There were infinite mysteries and countless worlds like seeds filled with limitless life. Up ahead, a ship appeared, which also happened to be heading toward the deeper parts of the universe. The deck of the ship was covered, making it impossible to see inside. It was an old, dilapidated ship, and yet somehow it radiated boundless power. An old man sat cross-legged at the prow, and at the stern was a young man in a black robe, with an icy cold expression and a murderous aura swirling around him. The man at the prow was Old Man Extermination. The youth at the stern was Slaughter. When Meng Hao saw them, he smiled. "Fellow Taoists, would you mind if my wife and I join you on your travels?" He took another step forward and he was on the ship. Slaughter opened his eyes, looked over and nodded. Then his eyes closed again. However, the faintest of smiles could be seen on his face. Old Man Extermination opened his eyes and they shone with a strange light. He looked at Meng Hao for a long moment, then smiled. Turning his head, he called out, "Apprentice, we have some new guests on board. Please bring out 2 cups of wine." A female voice could just barely be heard inside the cabin, acknowledging the words spoken by Extermination. Then the screen hanging at the cabin door was pushed aside, and a beautiful young woman appeared, upon whose face was a faint, enigmatic smile. She looked at Meng Hao, and then at Su Qing, and her eyes began to shine. At the same time, her cheeks seemed to flush with embarrassment. "Elder brother Fang Mu, big sister Su Qing, I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. "This is my master's ship and my master wanted me here," she smiled. Meng Hao's eyes went wide. Su Qing looked at her, then covered her mouth and laughed. Stepping forward, she clasped the young woman's hands in her own. If that beautiful young woman was Chu Yuyan, then who could she be? The end of I Shall Seal the Heavens. Oh, from Deathblade, have we really reached the end? The answer is yes and no. This is the official end, but Urgen wrote 3 other tales which I will be posting shortly. That's right, there is a bit more to the story, and in fact at least one of these other tales has some bombshell information in it, assuming these legendary tales are true. Stay tuned. P.S. The other tales do not count as part of the contest. Other Tales 1, Foster Father Key. A soft wind blew through the sky as the setting sun tinged the clouds with red light. The glow of evening turned the land saffron, and wheat fields rippled with orange waves. Everything was very beautiful. The wheat stalks drifted in the wind, creating a splendorous scene that would fill anyone with wonder. It was like a celestial paradise. The land here was fertile, the type that made it easy to harvest crops. As a result, the people who farmed it were rich. It was inhabited by mortals. The population was widely spread out through the lands. Everyone lived in their own manors and cared for their own families. In the highlands was one particular manor inhabited by a father and son. The son was very filial, and despite the wealth their family had accumulated, he did not act like a silkprince. The respect and love he showed his father could not be matched. The father wasn't very old, only about 40, but he was already spectacularly rich. Every day at dawn, he loved to go out into the courtyard and look up at the sky or out at the fields of wheat. In the evenings, he would go out again to look at the warm evening sky. He was happy. The lush fields meant that his family had plenty to eat. Yet, what made him most happy was his son. All of their neighbors knew how filial his son was. It was the type of attitude that seemed to seep out from his bones, something that was a part of his very soul. It was as if, regardless of the time or place, his love for his father would be unsurpassable. That man was Qi Yunai, and his son was Qi Jiusi. Because of Qi Jiusi's deep desire, Meng Hao had ensured that he was reunited with his father after they were reincarnated. They couldn't remember much of their past life, but in this life, both Qi Yunhai and Qi Jiusi were very happy. They were mortals now. When Qi Jiusi got married, a huge banquet was thrown, and all the friends and family were invited. It lasted for several days and filled the manor with bustle and excitement. Time passed by for them, day after day, year after year. Qi Jiusi grew older, and soon a new generation appeared in the family. Qi Yunhai grew older. No matter how much time passed, the manor was always a warm and loving place. Qi Jiusi always loved to go outside and look at the sky. He never changed that habit. "Grandpa, what are you looking at?" His grandson would often ask this question, and Qi Yunhai would never answer. He would always just smile and shake his head. Qi Jiusi would tousle his son's hair, but deep in his eyes, it was obvious that he knew the answer to the question. 20 years went by, and the grandson was now a young man. Qi Yunhai was even older, but his eyes were as clear as ever. In fact, they were clearer than before, as if he were now able to see back into his previous life. One day, when his grandson asked him that same old question, he sighed. "I'm waiting for your uncle." "My uncle," replied the grown grandson, looking a bit shocked. "I've always had the feeling that your father has a younger brother. He left a long time ago and still hasn't returned." Qi Yunhai seemed to be thinking about the past, but deep in his eyes, a bright glow could be seen. His grandson didn't understand, but Qi Jiusi did. His eyes were glowing in the same way. It was the glow of deep focus. Backslash. Many people who lived in this world were old friends and family of Meng Hao, who had been reborn in the cycle of reincarnation. Before leaving with Su Qing, Meng Hao came to check in on all those people, visiting one planet after another, gazing once again upon all the familiar faces. Wrapped up in his thoughts, he eventually brought Su Qing to one particular land mass which floated out in the starry sky. "You have old friends here?" she asked softly, looking out at the land mass. He smiled and looked at the land mass for a moment. Eyes flickering with memories, he said, "There is someone here who I look up to, someone I will never be able to forget. I need to go see him before we leave." It was winter. The sun was setting, illuminating the lands with redness. A gentle breeze blew as Meng Hao and Su Qing appeared in the courtyard of a certain manor. Apparently, the reincarnated Qi Yunhai couldn't see Meng Hao. He stood there, looking up into the sky, accompanied by Qi Jiusi and his grandson. Meng Hao looked at them, then walked forward and dropped down to kowtow to Qi Yunhai. Although they couldn't see him, he kowtowed nonetheless, touching his head to the ground. Memories flashed through his mind. He remembered how his foster father had cared for him in the ancient demon immortal sect. He remembered feeling fatherly love for the first time. Those same feelings filled his heart now. He would never forget how his foster father Qi had cared for him. Back then, he had assumed Qi Yunhai thought he was Qi Jiusi, even though that wasn't true. He would never forget how his foster father Qi had been willing to pay any price for him. His hair had slowly turned white, and eventually he passed away. It was only in that final moment that Meng Hao realized Qi Yunhai had known all along that he was Qi Jiusi. He would never forget what happened when he was sucked into the illusion outside the vast expanse. His foster father Qi had killed himself, all to help Meng Hao awaken from his stupor. As Meng Hao kowtowed, these thoughts filled his mind. Su Qing stood off to the side, and when she saw what was happening, she understood. Walking forward, she also knelt to kowtow, as a daughter-in-law should. "Foster father," Meng Hao said, "I just came to see you one last time." Almost as soon as the words left his mouth, Qi Yunhai suddenly looked down. The glow in his eyes intensified, and he smiled. Qi Jiusi had a similar reaction, and a wide smile appeared on his face. Qi Yunhai's grandson, the young man who was Qi Jiusi's son, seemed confused by the smiles on the faces of his father and grandfather. "I can feel it," Qi Yunhai said, smiling. "Your uncle is here." "Other tales too," Chu Yuyan. "It's spring and everything is dark. Perhaps that's not because it's nighttime, but because my heart is filled with darkness. I choose to remain in the dark. I don't want to open my eyes. I don't want to feel the world around me. I want to live in my own world. I don't want to awaken. I can still remember the first time I saw him in the Reliance sect oh so long ago, but I don't want to remember that. I don't want to think about it. Spring is when things are supposed to come back to life, but now spring is gone. It's getting hot. I can hear people talking, including my master, the incarnation of a medicinal pill. He sighs as he spends the summer watching over me. I don't want to think about everything that happened in the Violet Fate sect. Why can't I forget it? Why? It's cold now. Not the iciness of winter, but the crispness of autumn. It's raining. The world I live in is dark without even a scrap of light. I should be able to forget everything. I can almost forget the Reliance sect, the Rock, the Violet Fate sect. But no matter how hard I try, I can't forget what happened in the windswept realm. Why is it so hard to forget? Everything is freezing now. I can tell that it's snowing outside. After the snowflakes land on the ground, they're like me, cold and unmoving. But the snowflakes eventually find their way home. Unlike them, I don't know where to go from here. Years pass. I've lost track. Even if I manage to forget the windswept realm, I won't be able to forget what happened on planet Vast Expanse. I can't forget the ninth sect and my master there. Time is passing by. I feel like I'm lost in the darkness. But then I hear a voice speaking next to me. It seems as if someone is looking at me. I can't see that person, but I can sense the melancholy in that gaze. I want to forget everything, but the image of little treasure mixes with his face, and I can't forget him. I can't forget perfect. I want to cry, but I won't open my eyes. I feel the tears seeping down the sides of my face. Days pass, years, times change, and I'm not even sure how long it's been. Maybe 1,000 years, maybe 10,000, maybe even untold tens of thousands. The voices slowly fade away until everything is quiet. I am the only person left. I'm lonely, a part of the night, enveloped in darkness. Time passes. Eventually I reach the point when I think I might have forgotten everything. But then I hear someone talking, a hoarse voice speaking in my ear. Foolish girl, do you really think you can forget it all? That voice pierces into my soul, causing it to tremble. All of the memories I pretended to have forgotten suddenly erupt. It turns out I haven't forgotten about them at all. In fact, I remember everything even more clearly now, as if they have been engraved upon my soul. I am Chu Yuan. // I can't forget, she said softly. As she opened her eyes, tears streamed down her cheeks. The world was no longer dark. An old man was standing in front of her. His face was covered with wrinkles, and she didn't recognize him. However, there was something about him that seemed familiar, as if she had known him in a previous life. It was almost as if she had been destined to eventually meet him. Then stop trying to forget, the old man said, his voice so decisive it could sever nails and chop iron. I'm called Extermination. I achieved my Tao countless epochs in the past. Ever since then, I've spent my life looking for answers. I still haven't found them, so I'm going to continue my search in the depths of the universe. Are you willing to become my apprentice, foolish girl? If you are, I can take you with me into the depths of the universe. It's possible that you might meet that certain person along the way. Chu Yuyan closed her eyes and lay there for a long moment. Then she opened her eyes and climbed out of the coffin. Greetings, master, she said, kneeling before him. Extermination looked at her with warmth in his eyes. Years ago, when he had been pursuing his own Tao, he had eventually succeeded. However, the only thing which remained was his Tao. Along the way, he had given up everything, sacrificed everything. Although he remained focused, he could never forget his destroyed homeland, his old friends and family, and everything he had lost. During the age of Meng Hao, he had observed the lives of many people, and the only one who made an impression on him was this girl, who reminded him of a certain someone from the past. After seeing everything that had occurred between Chu Yuyan and Meng Hao, he finally decided to come here to help her. A long moment passed. Extermination smiled and then waved his sleeve. A dilapidated old ship appeared up in the sky. He took a step forward and was on the ship. Chu Yuyan looked around at the world for a moment and then followed him. Also on the ship was a cold-faced young man in a black robe, sitting there cross-legged. He looked over at Chu Yuyan and nodded, then closed his eyes and went back to meditating. Let's go, said Extermination, to the depths of the universe. The ship began to move forward, making not the slightest sound. It pierced through the void into the universe, bathing in the light of the countless seed worlds that existed there. Chu Yuyan sat there on the ship, and after a long moment, she thought back to what her new master had just told her, that she might encounter that very person she had been trying to forget. If I ever see him, what should be the first thing I say, she thought, suddenly nervous. Time passed differently on the ship. 1 month there was like an epoch out where Meng Hao existed. It was impossible to say exactly how much time passed. One day, Chu Yuyan suddenly heard someone talking outside the ship. Fellow Taoists, would you mind if my wife and I join you on your travels? As soon as she heard that voice, she shivered and started to get more nervous. Apprentice, we have some new guests on board. Please bring out 2 cups of wine. She took a deep breath. Trying to remain calm, she bit her lip and parted the curtain. When she stepped out, she saw the shocked Meng Hao and Su Qing standing next to him. Elder brother Fang Mu, big sister Su Qing, I'm not here to cause trouble, she said. This is my master's ship and my master wanted me here. Because she was beautiful, her smile was radiant. Because she was nervous, it was also a bit stiff. In fact, that was why. It seemed like such an enigmatic smile. Other Tales 3, The Parrot and the Meat Jelly. The universe was both pitch black and also filled with scintillating light. It was a bit of a contradiction. The dazzling light came from the innumerable worlds that existed, scattered about like seeds. They were like countless glowing pearls, sending their light shining out in all directions. The darkness came from the fact that the universe was immensely large. In fact, the distance that existed between even 2 of those seed worlds was almost impossible to describe. Within that space, there was no bright light, only deathly stillness and pitch black. The passage of time wasn't very obvious in the universe. Perhaps that was because the power of the universe was something difficult for even those in the ancestor realm to comprehend. Time passed. One day, a bright beam of light appeared, moving along through the universe at shocking speed. Closer examination would reveal that the beam of light contained a person. He was a middle-aged man whose soul appeared to be very weak. He wore a green robe and his face was ashen. Apparently, he was being chased. Although his expression was grim, there was something crafty flickering deep within his eyes. As the man sped along, a second beam of light appeared within the darkness. A woman could be seen, her face also a bit ashen as she flew along at top speed. Apparently, both of them were being chased by something. These two people knew each other, although they obviously didn't have a very good relationship and were even enemies. As they fled, they occasionally attacked each other in an attempt to slow the other down. The man frequently managed to get the upper hand, and yet could never do anything to permanently reduce the woman's speed. As they pierced through the silence of the universe, a third beam of light appeared behind them, a radiant and majestic light within which was a parrot. Its feathers were glistening and colorful, and it sped along like a shooting star, majestic and beautiful. It seemed like some sort of consummate battle weapon as it pursued the man and the woman. Suddenly, the parrot unleashed a burst of speed that rapidly closed the distance between itself and the man and woman. In the blink of an eye, he slammed into them, causing blood to spray out of the woman's mouth. At the same time, blood oozed down the man's chin. Taoist fifth, don't push things too far. That emperor of yours won't necessarily be able to defeat my true form. I'm the immortal of the universe. Although the man seemed to be raving hysterically, a clever flicker existed deep within his eyes, almost completely imperceptible. The woman's face was now thoroughly ashen. Gritting her teeth, she shot off at top speed. The pursuit continued until one of the seed worlds appeared up ahead. It was like many of the countless worlds that existed in the universe, except that this one had not yet become fully ripe. The will of its starry sky was still growing, and the living beings there had not yet become civilized. As the group closed in, the parrot's voice rang out, cold and detached. My master is definitely going to slaughter your true self, and I was given a mission by my lord to kill you, clone. You are your true self's attempt to give himself a chance to rise again, and I am definitely going to succeed just like my master. And then there's you, ancient immortal spirit. The two of you will never escape me. The parrot's expression was icy, and the words it spoke were even colder. As they echoed out into the universe, they seemed to cause everything to freeze over. Suddenly, a spell formation appeared around the parrot, spreading out in all directions, covering over even the man and the woman. Before either of them could react, colorful light sprang up, transforming into countless magical symbols. Mysterious chanting sounds could be heard as the spell formation began to spin. A murderous aura rose up as the magical symbols began to explode, transforming into destructive attack power that bore down on the man and the woman. In that critical moment of crisis, the man roared, unleashing a divine ability that caused his body to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he was a giant, with an enormous battle axe in his hand. Without a moment's pause, he swung the battle axe at the magical symbols, unleashing all of the power he could muster, power that could topple mountains and drain seas. Massive booms rang out and the enormous giant coughed up a mouthful of blood. His body was already on the verge of collapsing. A vicious expression on his face, he howled, Taoist fifth, you're pushing things too far. Even as the words left his mouth, 10 drops of golden blood emerged from his battered body. The blood drops immediately merged together, becoming a gigantic, blood-colored hand. The hand radiated a terrifying aura, something that caused the parrot's eyes to widen. It immediately recognized that aura. Those 10 drops of golden blood were the very reason why the parrot's lord was attempting to slaughter all heaven's true self. It was universe blood. Suddenly, all heaven's eyes glittered with bright light, and he began to laugh uproariously. Ancient immortal spirit, it's time to execute our plan. After that, you'll be free. The woman only hesitated for a moment before gritting her teeth decisively. Instantly, countless scales spread out over her skin. Her legs merged together, and a moment later, she had the body of a snake. She spun in place, and instead of fleeing, shoved her hands out violently. Her body withered rapidly as she drew upon her life force to unleash some sort of Taoist magic. As soon as the magic was unleashed, a powerful aura exploded out. It was a strange aura, ancient and filled with the sensation of countless years. That power instantly shot toward the parrot and the spell formation. In the blink of an eye, the spell formation began to wither up, and the parrot lurched to a halt, a cold light gleaming in its eyes. Then its energy began to rise up as it prepared to break through by force. The middle-aged man's hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, causing the hand formed from the 10 drops of blood to grow larger and larger. Soon, it was a huge sea of blood that rocketed toward the parrot. The woman was now severely weakened from using her time aura, and began to back up. Taoist fifth, did you really think that the immortal would be unprepared? How naive are you? You chasing me here was all part of my true self's plan. Wiping you out would be like cutting the arm off of that emperor of yours. Allheaven threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Apparently, all of his weakness from before had been a sham, a trick to get the parrot to follow him to a remote part of the universe, and then join forces with the woman to kill it. As the sea of blood reached its pinnacle and was bursting with power, it transformed into a sealing mark that spread out over the parrot. Not a bit of panic could be seen in the parrot's eyes, however, only icy calm. You tricked me into coming here, but you don't know the price I'm willing to pay to help my master slaughter your true self. Have I fallen into your scheme, or have you fallen into mine? The parrot sighed, as if it didn't wish to part with the world. But then its eyes flashed with determination. As the sea of blood closed in, the parrot suddenly began to emanate terrifying fluctuations. They were the fluctuations of self-detonation. Shockingly, it was choosing to self-detonate in order to kill its opponents. Perhaps an ordinary self-detonation wouldn't do anything to the terrifying aura it was facing, but the parrot had clearly prepared ahead of time. It was using some domineering technique to augment the power of its self-detonation to surpass the force it could ordinarily unleash. Allheaven's eyes widened, but then he let out a cold laugh. So you're willing to go that far. Unfortunately for you, my true self has made even more preparations. As he spoke, his hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, causing the fleeing woman to suddenly stop in place. Suddenly, something sealed inside of her was released, and her blood began to boil. Moments later, the fluctuations of self-detonation began to rise up within her. Shockingly, Allheaven was forcing her to self-detonate in order to give himself a chance to escape. The woman looked over at him furiously. This was not part of their agreement, and the fact that he was willing to sacrifice her at this critical moment left her eyes bloodshot. However, a cold smile then twisted her lips. Even as the two powers of self-detonation rose up, the parrot's voice rang out as cold as ever. What are you waiting for, ancient immortal spirit? I told you this was going to happen. Do something, don't hold back. If you want freedom, you have to fight for it. The parrot's words caused Allheaven's face to flicker. Smiling coldly, the woman took a deep breath. Back when Allheaven made his original deal with her, the parrot had secretly contacted her and had told her that things would end up this way. Now, it was without hesitation that she began to laugh. You were right. You can only have freedom if you fight for it. I can give up my position as ancient immortal to gain eternal freedom. Allheaven's face fell, and he was about to say something but didn't have the time. Even as the words left the woman's mouth, she suddenly fell apart. It was not a self-detonation, it was a complete and utter collapse. Flesh and blood poured out from her withered frame, spreading out, staining the starry sky bright red. Nirvanic rebirth curse. Life leads to death, death leads to life. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Send the will into oblivion, destroy the mind. Everything that exists shall now begin again. Henceforth there is no ancient immortal. As the woman's voice rang out, the starry sky began to shake. Then a huge explosion occurred. Intense pressure erupted out that crushed the parrot into dust. At the same time, it also crushed the sea of blood and caused Allheaven to let out a miserable scream. He tried to escape, but was unable and was instantly crushed by the pressure. The woman's body exploded, and yet she did not die. Her soul did not disperse. The final magic she had unleashed was something that could start a new epoch. Everything was crushed, but then, from within that destruction, everything was formed again. The seed world that had existed near their battle was affected by the waves of power. The will of its starry sky trembled and then was mostly wiped away. At the same time, a gaping hole was opened leading into the world. In the moment that the hole opened, the ash, chi, and blood of the man, the woman, and the parrot were all sucked in. In the blink of an eye, they were absorbed into the seed world. Many years later, within the starry sky of the seed world, a new life form came to exist among the other lives that teemed therein. It was the soul of a parrot who looked around at the boundless world, a blank look in its eyes. Another soul appeared, which gradually came to supersede the will of the starry sky. It forgot about its past and acted only on instinct. It was the will of Allheaven. Among the countless other living beings in that world, a woman appeared in the cycle of reincarnation. She wasn't aware of her previous life and was actually reborn over and over again, experiencing countless lives and innumerable epochs. Later, the parrot met someone who transformed it into a magical device, a copper mirror. One day, the woman met a person in one of the countless tinier worlds which populated the larger world she existed in. It was called the Paragon Immortal Realm. The person she met was one of the inhabitants of that smaller world who had come to be called the Lightning Emperor. The Lightning Emperor fell in love with that woman and she became the love of his life, his wife. Later, the lower realms of the Paragon Immortal Realm rebelled, egged on by the influence of all heaven. The Lightning Emperor fought for his home and fought for the woman he loved. In the end, he died in battle. When he died, countless lightning bolts spread out from his body, shaking the entire area. After he was no more, the woman sat with his corpse, racked with grief, weeping. In that moment, the memories inside of her which had been sealed away were unlocked. She looked down at the Lightning Emperor and her tears fell onto his armor. Eventually, the tears vanished, and apparently they took with them her feelings for the Lightning Emperor. Her eyes were now cold and blank. "We aren't even from the same world," she murmured. "This is just a temporary stop on my journey through life. Now I have awakened and the time has come for me to depart. I am free." With that, she left the world, returning to her travels through the universe. She had no desire to ever again meet the will of all heaven or the parrot. After she was gone, the corpse of the Lightning Emperor continued to float in the starry sky of the Paragon Immortal Realm. Gradually, it withered up. The armor on the corpse melted, and eventually, the corpse became translucent. All of that happened because of the tears of that woman in the moment that she awoke, tears which contained the power to fuse past and present lives. Because of the tears, the armor became fused with his soul, with the soul of the Lightning Emperor who should have died. Eventually, the corpse decomposed, fully fusing with the armor. Many years later, it awoke. At that time, it knew that it was essentially undying. It also knew that it should never become armor again and should not risk its life to protect someone. If it did so, it could lose that undying nature. Other than that, its memories were a blank. It began to wander the mountain and sea realm and gradually came to realize that it loved to chatter and that it loved to civilize bullies. Eventually, it also discovered that it couldn't count. One day it ran into a parrot which had just flown out of a copper mirror. "Hey there, Mr. Armored-looking fellow. Come, come, allow Lord Fifth to have a look at you. Why don't you have any fur or feathers? Screw the hell off, you bully. I'm gonna convert you." Note from Deathblade, and that's a wrap. It's been a wild ride, fellow Taoists. It's hard to believe it's all over. I will be posting some closing thoughts shortly. Other Tales 3, The Parrot and the Meat Jelly. The universe was both pitch black and also filled with scintillating light. It was a bit of a contradiction. The dazzling light came from the innumerable worlds that existed, scattered about like seeds. They were like countless glowing pearls, sending their light shining out in all directions. The darkness came from the fact that the universe was immensely large. In fact, the distance that existed between even two of those seed worlds was almost impossible to describe. Within that space, there was no bright light, only deathly stillness and pitch black. The passage of time wasn't very obvious in the universe. Perhaps that was because the power of the universe was something difficult for even those in the ancestor realm to comprehend. Time passed. One day, a bright beam of light appeared, moving along through the universe at shocking speed. Closer examination would reveal that the beam of light contained a person. He was a middle-aged man whose soul appeared to be very weak. He wore a green robe and his face was ashen. Apparently, he was being chased. Although his expression was grim, there was something crafty flickering deep within his eyes. As the man sped along, a second beam of light appeared within the darkness. A woman could be seen, her face also a bit ashen as she flew along at top speed. Apparently, both of them were being chased by something. These two people knew each other, although they obviously didn't have a very good relationship and were even enemies. As they fled, they occasionally attacked each other in an attempt to slow the other down. The man frequently managed to get the upper hand, and yet could never do anything to permanently reduce the woman's speed. As they pierced through the silence of the universe, a third beam of light appeared behind them, a radiant and majestic light within which was a parrot. Its feathers were glistening and colorful, and it sped along like a shooting star, majestic and beautiful. It seemed like some sort of consummate battle weapon as it pursued the man and the woman. Suddenly, the parrot unleashed a burst of speed that rapidly closed the distance between itself and the man and woman. In the blink of an eye, he slammed into them, causing blood to spray out of the woman's mouth. At the same time, blood oozed down the man's chin. "Taoist Fifth, don't push things too far. That emperor of yours won't necessarily be able to defeat my true form. I'm the immortal of the universe." Although the man seemed to be raving hysterically, a clever flicker existed deep within his eyes, almost completely imperceptible. The woman's face was now thoroughly ashen. Gritting her teeth, she shot off at top speed. The pursuit continued until one of the seed worlds appeared up ahead. It was like many of the countless worlds that existed in the universe, except that this one had not yet become fully ripe. The will of its starry sky was still growing, and the living beings there had not yet become civilized. As the group closed in, the parrot's voice rang out, cold and detached. "My master is definitely going to slaughter your true self, and I was given a mission by my lord to kill you, clone. You are your true self's attempt to give himself a chance to rise again, and I am definitely going to succeed just like my master. And then there's you, ancient immortal spirit. The two of you will never escape me." The parrot's expression was icy, and the words it spoke were even colder. As they echoed out into the universe, they seemed to cause everything to freeze over. Suddenly, a spell formation appeared around the parrot, spreading out in all directions, covering over even the man and the woman. Before either of them could react, colorful light sprang up, transforming into countless magical symbols. Mysterious chanting sounds could be heard as the spell formation began to spin. A murderous aura rose up as the magical symbols began to explode, transforming into destructive attack power that bore down on the man and the woman. In that critical moment of crisis, the man roared, unleashing a divine ability that caused his body to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he was a giant, with an enormous battle axe in his hand. Without a moment's pause, he swung the battle axe at the magical symbols, unleashing all of the power he could muster, power that could topple mountains and drain seas. Massive booms rang out and the enormous giant coughed up a mouthful of blood. His body was already on the verge of collapsing. A vicious expression on his face, he howled, "Taoist Fifth, you're pushing things too far." Even as the words left his mouth, 10 drops of golden blood emerged from his battered body. The blood drops immediately merged together, becoming a gigantic, blood-colored hand. The hand radiated a terrifying aura, something that caused the parrot's eyes to widen. It immediately recognized that aura. Those 10 drops of golden blood were the very reason why the parrot's lord was attempting to slaughter All Heaven's true self. It was universe blood. Suddenly, All Heaven's eyes glittered with bright light, and he began to laugh uproariously. "Ancient immortal spirit, it's time to execute our plan. After that, you'll be free." The woman only hesitated for a moment before gritting her teeth decisively. Instantly, countless scales spread out over her skin. Her legs merged together, and a moment later, she had the body of a snake. She spun in place, and instead of fleeing, shoved her hands out violently. Her body withered rapidly as she drew upon her life force to unleash some sort of Taoist magic. As soon as the magic was unleashed, a powerful aura exploded out. It was a strange aura, ancient and filled with the sensation of countless years. That power instantly shot toward the parrot and the spell formation. In the blink of an eye, the spell formation began to wither up, and the parrot lurched to a halt, a cold light gleaming in its eyes. Then its energy began to rise up as it prepared to break through by force. The middle-aged man's hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, causing the hand formed from the 10 drops of blood to grow larger and larger. Soon, it was a huge sea of blood that rocketed toward the parrot. The woman was now severely weakened from using her time aura, and began to back up. "Taoist Fifth, did you really think that the immortal would be unprepared? How naive are you? You chasing me here was all part of my true self's plan. Wiping you out would be like cutting the arm off of that emperor of yours." All Heaven threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Apparently, all of his weakness from before had been a sham, a trick to get the parrot to follow him to a remote part of the universe, and then join forces with the woman to kill it. As the sea of blood reached its pinnacle and was bursting with power, it transformed into a sealing mark that spread out over the parrot. Not a bit of panic could be seen in the parrot's eyes, however, only icy calm. "You tricked me into coming here, but you don't know the price I'm willing to pay to help my master slaughter your true self. Have I fallen into your scheme, or have you fallen into mine?" The parrot sighed, as if it didn't wish to part with the world. But then its eyes flashed with determination. As the sea of blood closed in, the parrot suddenly began to emanate terrifying fluctuations. They were the fluctuations of self-detonation. Shockingly, it was choosing to self-detonate in order to kill its opponents. Perhaps an ordinary self-detonation wouldn't do anything to the terrifying aura it was facing, but the parrot had clearly prepared ahead of time. It was using some domineering technique to augment the power of its self-detonation to surpass the force it could ordinarily unleash. All Heaven's eyes widened, but then he let out a cold laugh. "So you're willing to go that far. Unfortunately for you, my true self has made even more preparations." As he spoke, his hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture, causing the fleeing woman to suddenly stop in place. Suddenly, something sealed inside of her was released, and her blood began to boil. Moments later, the fluctuations of self-detonation began to rise up within her. Shockingly, all heaven was forcing her to self-detonate in order to give himself a chance to escape. The woman looked over at him furiously. This was not part of their agreement, and the fact that he was willing to sacrifice her at this critical moment left her eyes bloodshot. However, a cold smile then twisted her lips. Even as the two powers of self-detonation rose up, the parrot's voice rang out as cold as ever. "What are you waiting for, ancient immortal spirit? I told you this was going to happen. Do something, don't hold back. If you want freedom, you have to fight for it." The parrot's words caused all heaven's face to flicker. Smiling coldly, the woman took a deep breath. Back when all heaven made his original deal with her, the parrot had secretly contacted her and had told her that things would end up this way. Now, it was without hesitation that she began to laugh. "You were right. You can only have freedom if you fight for it. I can give up my position as ancient immortal to gain eternal freedom." All heaven's face fell, and he was about to say something but didn't have the time. Even as the words left the woman's mouth, she suddenly fell apart. It was not a self-detonation, it was a complete and utter collapse. Flesh and blood poured out from her withered frame, spreading out, staining the starry sky bright red. Nirvanic rebirth curse. Life leads to death, death leads to life. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Send the will into oblivion, destroy the mind. Everything that exists shall now begin again. Henceforth there is no ancient immortal. As the woman's voice rang out, the starry sky began to shake. Then a huge explosion occurred. Intense pressure erupted out that crushed the parrot into dust. At the same time, it also crushed the sea of blood and caused all heaven to let out a miserable scream. He tried to escape, but was unable and was instantly crushed by the pressure. The woman's body exploded, and yet she did not die. Her soul did not disperse. The final magic she had unleashed was something that could start a new epoch. Everything was crushed, but then, from within that destruction, everything was formed again. The seed world that had existed near their battle was affected by the waves of power. The will of its starry sky trembled and then was mostly wiped away. At the same time, a gaping hole was opened leading into the world. In the moment that the hole opened, the ash, chi, and blood of the man, the woman, and the parrot were all sucked in. In the blink of an eye, they were absorbed into the seed world. Many years later, within the starry sky of the seed world, a new life form came to exist among the other lives that teemed therein. It was the soul of a parrot who looked around at the boundless world, a blank look in its eyes. Another soul appeared, which gradually came to supersede the will of the starry sky. It forgot about its past and acted only on instinct. It was the will of all heaven. Among the countless other living beings in that world, a woman appeared in the cycle of reincarnation. She wasn't aware of her previous life and was actually reborn over and over again, experiencing countless lives and innumerable epochs. Later, the parrot met someone who transformed it into a magical device, a copper mirror. One day, the woman met a person in one of the countless tinier worlds which populated the larger world she existed in. It was called the Paragon Immortal Realm. The person she met was one of the inhabitants of that smaller world who had come to be called the Lightning Emperor. The Lightning Emperor fell in love with that woman and she became the love of his life, his wife. Later, the lower realms of the Paragon Immortal Realm rebelled, egged on by the influence of all heaven. The Lightning Emperor fought for his home and fought for the woman he loved. In the end, he died in battle. When he died, countless lightning bolts spread out from his body, shaking the entire area. After he was no more, the woman sat with his corpse, racked with grief, weeping. In that moment, the memories inside of her which had been sealed away were unlocked. She looked down at the Lightning Emperor and her tears fell onto his armor. Eventually, the tears vanished, and apparently they took with them her feelings for the Lightning Emperor. Her eyes were now cold and blank. "We aren't even from the same world," she murmured. "This is just a temporary stop on my journey through life. Now I have awakened and the time has come for me to depart. I am free." With that, she left the world, returning to her travels through the universe. She had no desire to ever again meet the will of all heaven or the parrot. After she was gone, the corpse of the Lightning Emperor continued to float in the starry sky of the Paragon Immortal Realm. Gradually, it withered up. The armor on the corpse melted, and eventually, the corpse became translucent. All of that happened because of the tears of that woman in the moment that she awoke, tears which contained the power to fuse past and present lives. Because of the tears, the armor became fused with his soul, with the soul of the Lightning Emperor who should have died. Eventually, the corpse decomposed, fully fusing with the armor. Many years later, it awoke. At that time, it knew that it was essentially undying. It also knew that it should never become armor again and should not risk its life to protect someone. If it did so, it could lose that undying nature. Other than that, its memories were a blank. It began to wander the mountain and sea realm and gradually came to realize that it loved to chatter and that it loved to civilize bullies. Eventually, it also discovered that it couldn't count. One day it ran into a parrot which had just flown out of a copper mirror. "Hey there, Mr. Armored-looking fellow. Come, come, allow Lord Fifth to have a look at you. Why don't you have any fur or feathers? Screw the hell off, you bully. I'm gonna convert you." Note from Deathblade, and that's a wrap. It's been a wild ride, fellow Taoists. It's hard to believe it's all over. I will be posting some closing thoughts shortly.